My name is Winston Graves, and I spent 40 years welding steel tracks for the railroad so that trains could carry people to places I would never see. I thought I knew what cold felt like. I thought the wind whipping off Lake Michigan in January was the coldest thing on earth. I was wrong. The coldest thing on earth is the look in your son's eyes when he decides you are no longer a father, but a liability. I sold my house to pay off his debts. I gave him everything I had. And in return, he kicked me out into a -10-degree freeze, saying I was just a burden. I wandered through the biting cold until I found an abandoned train car in a forgotten yard. I survived by collecting bottles and patching holes with scrap metal. 3 months later, a storm hit and everything changed. But before I tell you how a 73-year-old man turned a rusted boxcar into a fortress, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that a man's dignity is the one thing he should never trade away. The house on Dorchester Avenue was not a mansion. It was a simple brick bungalow on the south side of Chicago with 3 bedrooms and a porch that leaned a little to the left. But it was mine. I had bought it in 1974 with a down payment I scraped together by working double shifts at the rail yard. Every brick in that house held a memory. The kitchen was where my wife Lucille used to hum gospel songs while she fried catfish on Friday nights. The living room was where I taught my son Andre how to tie his shoes and how to throw a baseball. The scratching post by the window was where our old cat used to sit and watch the snow fall. Lucille passed away 3 years ago, and since then the house was quiet, but it was a warm quiet. It was the silence of a life well lived. I owed nothing to the bank. I owed nothing to any man. I was a retired welder with a bad back, arthritic hands, and a paid-off mortgage. I thought I was safe. I thought I had reached the finish line. But the trouble did not knock on the door. It used a key. It was a Tuesday evening in November. The radiators were clanking the way they always did, a sound that used to annoy me but now felt like the heartbeat of the house. I was sitting in my recliner reading the newspaper when the front door opened. Andre walked in. He was 35 years old, but that night he looked like a terrified child. He was sweating despite the chill in the air. His eyes were bloodshot and his hands were shaking so hard he could barely close the door behind him. Behind him walked Tiffany, my daughter-in-law. She was a realtor. She was a woman who smiled with her mouth but never with her eyes. She wore a beige trench coat that cost more than my monthly pension check, and she held a leather briefcase against her chest like a shield. She looked around my living room not with nostalgia but with the calculating gaze of an appraiser. She was measuring the square footage. She was counting the dollar signs. Andre collapsed onto the rug, the same rug where he used to play with his toy trains. He buried his face in his hands and started to sob. It was a pathetic sound, a sound that made my stomach turn. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, I am in trouble, deep trouble." I put down my paper. I looked at him. I saw the fear. "What is it, Andre?" I asked. "Is it the police?" "No," Tiffany answered for him. Her voice was sharp and clipped. "It is not the police, Winston. It is much worse. It is the sharks." Andre looked up. His face was a mess of tears and snot. "I owe money, Dad," he whispered. "I made some bad bets. Online poker, crypto. I thought I could double it. I thought I could win it back. But I lost. I lost it all." "How much?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. $200,000, Andre sobbed. "And they want it by Friday. They said if I do not pay, they will hurt me. They said they will hurt Tiffany." I looked at Tiffany. She did not look scared. She looked impatient. She walked over to the dining table and set her briefcase down. She snapped the latches open. Click, click. The sound was like a gun being cocked. "We do not have that kind of liquidity," Winston, Tiffany said, smoothing her skirt. "Our assets are tied up in the new development project. We are leveraged to the hilt. If these people come for us, it is over. Andre goes to jail or the hospital. Or worse." She pulled a stack of papers from the briefcase. "But there is a solution," she said. "A solution that benefits everyone." She pushed the papers across the polished wood of the dining table Lucille had loved so much. "We sell this house," Tiffany said. "The market is hot right now. I have a buyer lined up, a developer who wants the lot. He is offering cash, $300,000. We pay off the debt, and with the leftover $100,000 we put a down payment on the new house in the suburbs." She smiled then. a wide plastic smile that showed too many teeth. And the best part, Winston, is that you come with us. The new house is huge, 5,000 square feet. We are building a mother-in-law suite in the basement just for you. It will have its own bathroom, its own kitchenette. You will never have to worry about maintenance or heating bills again. You will be surrounded by family. We will take care of you. I looked at the papers. I looked at the walls of my home. I looked at the framed photo of Lucille on the mantel. She was smiling in the picture wearing her Sunday hat. I wondered what she would say. She would probably tell me that a house is just wood and brick, but a son is flesh and blood. She would tell me to save him. But my gut told me something else. My gut told me that a man who sells his shelter is a man who walks into the storm naked. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. The streetlights were flickering on. "This is my home, Tiffany," I said, my voice low. "I worked 40 years for this roof. I promised Lucille I would never sell it. Dad, please." Andre crawled over to me. He grabbed my leg. He was begging, a grown man on his knees. "I am going to die, Dad. They are going to kill me. You are the only one who can save me. Please, do it for Mom. She would not want me to die." He used her name. He used his dead mother as a weapon. I looked down at him. I saw the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I didn't see the weak gambling addict he had become. I saw my son. And a father's love is a heavy chain. It binds you even when you want to run. "And think about your arthritis." Winston Tiffany chimed in, stepping closer. "Do you really want to be shoveling snow this winter? Do you want to be climbing these stairs when you are 80? The new suite is ground level. It is accessible. It is the responsible choice." I looked at the papers again. Real estate purchase agreement. The words seemed to blur. "If I sign this," I asked, looking at Andre, "you promise me no more gambling. You promise me you get a job." "I swear, Dad," Andre cried, standing up and wiping his face. "I swear on my life, I will turn everything around. We will be a family again. Just us. In the big house." I walked to the table. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy. It felt like a piece of lead pipe. I looked at Lucille's photo one last time. "Forgive me, Lucy," I whispered. "I have to save the boy." I signed, Winston Graves. The ink was black and permanent. With that signature, I erased 40 years of history. With that signature, I became a guest in my own life. Tiffany snatched the papers away the moment the pen lifted from the page. She checked the signature, ensuring it was legible. She nodded. "Good," she said. "I will file this in the morning. The closing is fast. The money will be in Andre's account by Thursday." She closed the briefcase. The click of the latch sounded different this time. It sounded like a cell door locking. The next 3 days were a blur. I packed my life into cardboard boxes. How do you fit 40 years into 10 boxes? You don't. You throw things away. I threw away my old welding magazines. I threw away the broken toaster I meant to fix. I donated Lucille's clothes to the church. That was the hardest part. Seeing her dresses in a trash bag felt like losing her all over again. Thursday came. The wire transfer hit. Andre showed me the screen on his phone. He was laughing. He looked 10 years younger. The fear was gone, replaced by a manic energy. "We are rich, Dad," he said. "Well, we are safe. Same thing." Tiffany was on the phone constantly, talking to contractors, talking to bankers. She barely looked at me. She was busy. Saturday was moving day. The developer's crew was coming on Monday to start the demolition. They weren't even going to keep the house. They were going to bulldoze Lucille's kitchen to build condos. I stood on the porch with my 2 suitcases and my toolbox. My toolbox was the one thing I refused to part with. It was an old red metal box, heavy and scratched, filled with the wrenches and hammers that had built the railroads. It was my identity. Andre pulled up in his SUV. Tiffany was in the passenger seat wearing large sunglasses. "Get in, Dad," Andre said, popping the trunk. "Let us get you to your new life." I put my bags in the back. I climbed into the back seat. The leather was cold. We drove out of the city. We watched the skyline fade in the rearview mirror. We drove toward the wealthy suburbs where the houses looked like castles made of styrofoam. But we didn't go to a house. We pulled into the parking lot of a Motel 6 off the highway. I leaned forward. "Why are we stopping here, Andre?" Tiffany turned around in her seat. She lowered her sunglasses. Her eyes were blue and cold like ice chips. There is a slight delay with the occupancy permit for the new house, Winston, she said. The inspector found an issue with the wiring in the basement suite. It is not safe for you yet. Not safe. So what am I doing here, I asked. Just for a week, Tiffany said. Maybe 2, until the contractors finish the drywall. We booked you a room. It is paid for. It has cable. Andre wouldn't look at me. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Andre, I said. Is this true? He looked out the window. Just a week, Dad. Just until we get settled. Tiffany says it is for the best. Tiffany says. Always what Tiffany says. I opened the door. The wind cut through my coat. It was November in Chicago and the air smelled of snow. I took my suitcases. I took my toolbox. Room 104, Tiffany said, handing me a plastic key card. We will call you on Sunday to check in. She didn't say goodbye. She rolled up the window. Andre looked at me in the side mirror. I saw him mouth the words sorry. Then he put the car in gear and drove away. I stood in the parking lot of a cheap motel watching the taillights of my son's car disappear into the gray evening. I was 73 years old. I had just sold my home to save his life. And he had left me in a parking lot with a plastic key and a lie. I knew it was a lie. I had been a welder. I knew how construction worked. Wiring issues don't take weeks to fix. You fix them or you work around them. They didn't want me there. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I walked into the room. It smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed. I placed my toolbox on the floor between my feet. I rested my hand on the cold metal lid. I am not a burden, I whispered to the empty room. I am a builder. But as I lay down that night listening to the trucks rumble by on the highway, I felt a chill that the heater couldn't chase away. It was the chill of realizing that the ink on that contract was the devil's signature. I had signed away my shield, and now the winter was coming. I stayed in that motel for a week. Then I called Andre. No answer. I called Tiffany. Voicemail. The front desk clerk told me the card on file had been declined for the second week. That was when I knew. The delay wasn't about wiring. The delay was permanent. I packed my bags. I didn't wait for them to kick me out. I checked out. I caught a bus to the address of the new house Andre had shown me on the listing. I was going to get answers, and if I didn't get answers, I was going to use the tools in my red box to dismantle their lies. But I didn't know that the cold I felt now was just a gentle breeze compared to the freeze that was waiting for me. I didn't know that I was about to walk into a nightmare that would strip me of everything except my will to survive. The bus ride was long. The suburbs were quiet. Too quiet. I got off at the corner of Oak Creek Drive. I walked 3 blocks. My suitcases dragged in the snow. My breath puffed out in white clouds. I saw the house. It was huge. A McMansion with pillars and a 3-car garage. There were lights on in the windows, warm golden lights. I walked up the driveway. I saw Andre's SUV. I saw a new Mercedes parked next to it. That must be Tiffany's new car bought with my equity. I reached the front door. I raised my hand to knock. My hand was shaking not from age but from rage. I knocked. The sound echoed. Footsteps approached. The door opened. It was Tiffany. She was wearing a silk robe. She held a glass of wine. When she saw me, her face didn't show surprise. It showed annoyance. "Winston," she sighed. "You are early. We are having a dinner party. This is not a good time." "I am not a guest, Tiffany," I said, pushing past her. "I live here. Remember, the suite in the basement." She blocked my path. She was small, but she stood her ground. "About that," she said, taking a sip of wine, "plans have changed." And in that moment, staring into her cruel, unblinking eyes, I realized the devil didn't have horns. She had a real estate license and a glass of Merlot, and the conflict was just beginning. The week at the Motel 6 turned into 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks turned into a month of staring at the beige walls that were peeling at the corners. A month of eating instant noodles made with hot water from the bathroom tap because I could not afford to eat at the diner across the street. A month of silence. My phone sat on the nightstand like a black brick. I checked it every hour, waiting for the screen to light up with Andre's name, waiting for him to say, "Dad, the drywall is done, come home." But the phone never rang. The only calls I got were from robocallers trying to sell me car insurance for a car I no longer owned. I watched my bank account dwindle. The pension check from the railroad was steady, but it was small. It was meant to pay for groceries and electricity in a paid-off house, not for a nightly rate at a motel. I did the math on the back of a napkin. I had 3 days of money left. After that, I would be on the street. I was 73 years old. I had worked hard every day of my life. I had followed the rules, and now I was counting quarters to buy a cup of coffee while my son lived in a mansion bought with my sweat and blood. The anger did not come all at once. It built up slowly like steam in a boiler. It started as confusion, then it turned into worry, and finally it hardened into a cold resolve. I was not going to fade away in a cheap motel room. I was going to my house. It was a Tuesday in December. The weatherman on the small television said a polar vortex was descending on Chicago. Temperatures were dropping rapidly. The wind chill was expected to reach 20 below zero. It was the kind of cold that freezes your eyelashes together, the kind of cold that kills. I packed my 2 suitcases. I picked up my red metal toolbox. It was heavier than I remembered. My arthritis was flaring up in the low pressure, making my hands ache with a dull, throbbing pain, but I gripped the handle tight. That toolbox was the only thing I had left that proved I was a man who built things. I checked out of the motel. The clerk looked at me with pity. He knew. Motel clerks always know when a man has nowhere to go. "Good luck, Mr. Graves," he said. "Stay warm out there." I took the bus to the end of the line, then transferred to the suburban connector. The landscape changed outside the window. The gray concrete of the city gave way to snow-covered lawns and wide driveways. The houses got bigger. The fences got higher. This was a different world, a world of security systems and heated garages. I got off at the stop nearest to Oak Creek Drive. The wind hit me instantly. It was a physical blow. It cut through my wool coat like a razor. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my face and started walking. My suitcases dragged in the snow, leaving 2 long furrows behind me. It took me 40 minutes to walk the mile to the house. By the time I reached the driveway, my feet were numb. I could not feel my toes. My breath came in short, ragged clouds. I stood at the bottom of the driveway and looked up. The house was magnificent. It was a sprawling brick estate with white pillars and tall windows. It glowed in the twilight. Golden light spilled out onto the snow, looking warm and inviting. I could see a Christmas tree in the front window, tall and perfectly decorated. My money bought that tree. My sacrifice bought that warmth. I walked up the driveway past the Mercedes and the SUV. I climbed the front steps. My hand shook as I reached for the doorbell. Ding dong. The sound was deep and melodic, echoing inside the house. I heard footsteps, light and quick, then heavier, slower ones. The door opened. Tiffany stood there. She was wearing a thick cream-colored sweater and leggings. She held a mug of hot cocoa in her hand. The smell of chocolate and peppermint drifted out, wrapping around me like a cruel memory of what home used to smell like. "Winston," she said. Her voice was flat. No surprise, no welcome, just annoyance. "What are you doing here?" I dropped my suitcases. My hands were freezing. "I am coming home." "Tiffany," I said, my voice raspy from the cold. "The money ran out. The motel kicked me out. I cannot stay there anymore." Tiffany did not step back to let me in. She stood in the center of the doorway, blocking the heat. "This is not a good time, Winston," she said, taking a sip of her cocoa. "We are settling in. The kids are doing homework. I do not care about the time," I said, stepping forward. "I paid for this house, Tiffany. I paid for the roof over your head. Now move aside. I am going to my suite." She did not move. She put a hand on the doorframe. "There is no suite, Winston," she said. The words hung in the freezing air. "What?" I asked. "We decided against it," she said casually, as if discussing a paint color. "The contractor said it would cost too much to put plumbing in the basement, so we turned it into a media room, a home theater. Andre really wanted a place to watch the game." I stared at her. My mind could not process the cruelty. "You turned my room into a theater. You have to understand, Winston," she said, her voice taking on that condescending tone she used with waitresses and clerks. "A man your age. You have needs, medical needs. We cannot provide that here. We are busy professionals. We cannot be changing diapers or watching to make sure you do not leave the stove on." "I have never left a stove on in my life," I shouted. "I was a welder. I worked with fire for 40 years. "Shh," Tiffany hissed, putting a finger to her lips. "Do not shout. You will scare the children. See, this is exactly what Andre was talking about." What Andre was talking about. I looked past her. I saw movement in the hallway. "Andre," I yelled. "Andre, get out here." My son appeared from the shadows of the living room. He was wearing a new cashmere sweater. He looked soft. He looked well-fed. He held a remote control in his hand. He saw me standing in the snow, shivering, my face gray with cold. He saw his wife blocking the door. "Andre, surely you do not agree with this," I said, holding out my hands. Tell her I sold my house to save you. Tell her I belong here." Andre looked at me. Then he looked at Tiffany. She gave him a sharp look, a look that told him exactly what to say. "Dad," Andre said, his voice weak and trembling. Maybe Tiffany is right. You have been acting strange lately. Forgetting things, getting angry." "I am angry because you lied to me," I roared. "See," Andre said, stepping back behind his wife. "He is aggressive. I cannot have that around the kids, Dad. I just cannot." "You promised me," I whispered. "You swore on your mother's life." "That was before we realized how bad your condition is," Tiffany interrupted. "We looked into it, Winston. There is a state-run facility downtown, the Shelter of St. Jude. They take people like you, indigent seniors. We can drop you off there tomorrow." Tomorrow, and tonight I asked, "Where do I sleep tonight?" Tiffany looked at my suitcases. Then she looked at the snow. "Not here," she said. "We cannot start this precedent. If we let you in tonight, you will never leave. You have to go, Winston. Go back to the motel. We will send you some money in a few days." "I have no money," I said. "I spent my last dollar getting here. It is 10 degrees below zero, Tiffany. If you close this door, you are killing me." "You are being dramatic," Tiffany scoffed. "There is a shelter 3 miles away. Walk there. It will be good exercise." I tried to push past her. I was desperate. The cold was biting into my bones. "No," I said. "I am coming in." I grabbed the door handle. Tiffany screamed. "Andre, call the police. He is attacking me." She shoved me. She was younger and stronger, and I was off balance on the icy porch. I stumbled backward. I fell hard onto the concrete steps. Pain shot through my hip. My toolbox tipped over, spilling wrenches and screwdrivers into the snow. "Get off my property!" Tiffany screamed. She grabbed my suitcases one by one and threw them down the stairs. They tumbled past me, landing in a snowbank. Andre stood in the doorway watching. He did not move to help me up. He did not tell her to stop. He just stood there clutching his remote control, letting his wife throw his father into the freeze. "Dad, go," Andre whispered. "Just go before the police come. She will press charges, Dad. She really will." I looked up at him from the ground. The snow was soaking through my pants. "Andre," I said, "I built the tracks you played on. I carried you when you broke your leg. How can you do this?" Andre closed his eyes. "I am sorry, Dad, but I have to think of my family." "I am your family," I whispered. "Not anymore," Tiffany said. She stepped back. She grabbed the handle of the heavy oak door. "Please," I said, reaching out a hand. "It is so cold." "Goodbye," Winston, Tiffany said. Slam! The sound was like a gunshot. The heavy deadbolt slid into place with a definitive click. I lay there on the cold concrete for a long moment. The porch light clicked off. They turned off the light. They wanted me to disappear into the dark. I slowly pulled myself up. My hip throbbed. My hands were numb. I gathered my tools from the snow, putting them back into the red box one by one. My fingers were so stiff I could barely grasp the metal handles. I dragged my suitcases to the bottom of the driveway. I looked back at the house. I could see them through the living room window. They were sitting on the couch. Andre was laughing at something on the TV. Tiffany was pouring more wine. They had erased me. In the span of 10 minutes, I had gone from a father to a trespasser. I turned away. The wind howled, tearing at my coat. I checked the thermometer on the bank sign down the street. Minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. I had no money, no phone battery, no place to go. The shelter Tiffany mentioned was miles away, and I knew I couldn't make it walking in this storm. The cold was already seeping into my core. I could feel my thinking getting slow, my movements getting clumsy. Hypothermia was knocking. I needed shelter. Any shelter. I remembered the bus ride in. About a mile back near the old industrial district, I had seen a line of trees and a rusted fence. Behind that fence, I had seen the familiar shape of iron tracks. The yards. It was an old switching yard, abandoned since the 90s. I used to work near there. If I could make it to the tracks, maybe I could find an overhang. Maybe I could find a windbreak. I started walking, one foot in front of the other. The wind screamed in my ears, telling me to lie down, telling me to sleep. But the welder in me refused. The welder knew that heat comes from friction, from movement, from work. "I am Winston Graves," I muttered to the rhythm of my boots crunching in the snow. "I do not break, I do not bend." But as the streetlights faded and the darkness of the industrial park swallowed me, I realized that this was not just a cold night. This was a death sentence, and my own son had been the executioner. I walked into the blackness clutching my red toolbox like it was the only piece of warmth left in the world. And in a way it was. The wind was not just a weather event anymore. It was a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders, trying to crush me into the asphalt. I had walked maybe a mile from the house where my son lived, but it felt like I had walked across the entire Arctic Circle. My feet were gone. I knew they were attached to my legs because I could see my boots moving in the rhythm of a slow death march, but I could not feel them. They were heavy blocks of ice dragging through the drifts. Left foot, right foot, breathe. The air was so cold it tasted like metal. Every time I inhaled, my lungs spasmed. I could feel the moisture in my nose freezing instantly. My eyelashes were heavy with ice. I had to keep blinking to keep my eyes from sealing shut. Hypothermia is a liar. That is what we used to tell the rookies in the rail yard during the winter shifts. The cold lies to you. It tells you that you are warm. It tells you that the snowbank looks soft like a feather bed. It tells you that if you just close your eyes for a minute, you will feel better. I felt that lie whispering in my ear now. Just sit down, Winston. Just rest your toolbox. The snow is clean. The snow is quiet. I slapped my own face. The sting was dull, but it was enough to wake me up. No, I growled into the scarf wrapped around my mouth. Not tonight. Not while they are warm. I kept moving. I had left the manicured streets of the suburbs behind. The houses were gone, replaced by the jagged silhouettes of old factories and warehouses. This was the edge of the industrial district, the forgotten part of the city. The streetlights here were broken. The road was unplowed. I dragged my suitcase with one hand and gripped my red toolbox with the other. That toolbox was 50 pounds of steel, but I would not drop it. It was my anchor. If I dropped it, I was just a homeless old man. As long as I held it, I was a worker looking for a job, even if the job was just staying alive. Then I smelled it. Under the scent of snow and exhaust, there was a smell I would recognize in my sleep. Creosote, rust, diesel oil, the smell of the railroad. I looked to my left. Through the swirling white darkness, I saw a chain-link fence. It was torn in places, covered in vines that were now frozen brown ropes. Beyond the fence, the ground dropped away into a wide, shallow valley. I stumbled toward it. I found a gap in the fence where vandals had cut the wire years ago. I squeezed through, tearing the sleeve of my coat, but I didn't care. I slid down the embankment, my suitcase tumbling ahead of me. I landed in the gravel at the bottom. I brushed the snow from my face and looked up. I was standing in a graveyard of giants. This was the Yards. I remembered this place. Back in the 90s, it was a bustling transfer station. Now, it was a tomb. Dozens of train cars sat on tracks that led nowhere. Weeds grew up through the wheel trucks. Graffiti covered the sides of the tankers. They were dark, silent, and massive. To anyone else, this place would look terrifying. To me, it looked like salvation. I walked down the line of cars. The wind was blocked slightly by the sheer mass of the trains, giving me a moment of relief. I scanned the cars with a professional eye. Tanker car, no good. Rounded sides, no way to get in without a ladder and cold steel against your back. Flatbed, useless. Hopper car. Open top full of snow. I needed a boxcar. A standard 50-foot Pullman Standard, or maybe an old refrigerated reefer car with insulated walls. I walked deeper into the yard. My hip was screaming in protest. My energy was fading fast. The black spots in my vision were growing larger. Lord, I whispered, I am not asking for a mansion. I am just asking for 4 walls and a roof. And then I saw it. It was sitting on a spur track separated from the main line, almost hidden by a thicket of overgrown sumac bushes. It was an old 40-foot boxcar, probably from the late 50s. The paint was peeling, revealing layers of orange rust, but the body looked straight, no major dents. The roofline looked intact. I limped toward it. I reached out and touched the side. The steel was freezing, but it was solid. I moved to the side door. It was a sliding door, heavy-gauge steel. It was closed. I grabbed the handle. I pulled. It didn't move. I pulled again, putting my weight into it. My boots slipped on the icy gravel. The door was rusted shut, fused by decades of neglect and ice. I fell to my knees in the snow. I wanted to cry. I was inches away from shelter, and I was locked out. Then I looked at my red toolbox sitting in the snow beside me. I am not a beggar, I said to myself, my voice gaining strength. I am a welder. I fix things. I opened the box. My fingers were stiff claws, but I managed to unlatch the metal clasps. Inside, my tools lay in their organized trays, wrenches, hammers, and my prized possession, a 24-inch wrecking bar made of hardened steel. I grabbed the bar. The cold metal burned my hand through my glove. I stood up. I jammed the flat end of the bar into the gap between the door and the frame. I found a purchase point near the roller track. I leaned into it. "Come on," I grunted. "Move." The rust crunched. A screech of metal on metal echoed through the silent yard. It was a horrible sound, like a banshee screaming, but to me, it was music. I repositioned the bar. I hammered the end with the palm of my hand, driving it deeper. I heaved with everything I had. Every ounce of anger at Tiffany, every ounce of disappointment in Andre, every ounce of pain in my frozen feet. I channeled it all into that steel bar. Groan. The door jumped. A gap of 6 inches appeared. I dropped the bar and grabbed the edge of the door with my gloved hands. I dug my boots into the gravel. I pulled. I screamed a primal roar into the night. The door slid open another 2 feet and then jammed. It was enough. I grabbed my toolbox. I threw my suitcase inside. Then I grabbed the edge of the floor. It was chest high. I tried to jump up, but my legs failed me. I was too weak, too old. Panic rose in my throat. I could not die on the doorstep. I dragged a loose railroad tie from the weeds. It was heavy, soaked in oil and ice. I propped it up against the opening, creating a step. I climbed, I clawed, I scraped my belly against the rusty floor. I pulled myself in like a wounded seal hauling itself onto the ice. I rolled onto the floor of the boxcar and lay there panting. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I was inside. The wind stopped. The biting, cutting wind that had been hunting me for hours was gone. The air inside was still freezing, but it was still. I sat up. It was pitch black. I fumbled in my pocket for my lighter. My hands shook so bad it took me 3 tries to spark it. The flame flared up, illuminating my new home. It was filthy. Decades of trash covered the floor, old beer cans, rotted pallets, a nest of what looked like shredded insulation in the corner. I heard the scurry of tiny claws, rats. I swung the light around. The walls were plywood lined over steel. That was good. Insulation. The roof was sound. No snow on the floor. I was safe. But I was freezing. The exertion of breaking in had burned the last of my body heat. The sweat under my clothes was turning cold. I started to shiver violently, uncontrollably. My teeth chattered so hard I thought they would crack. I needed heat, even a little bit. I looked around. There was no wood dry enough to burn. The pallets were soaked with oil and rot. I opened my suitcase. I pulled out a stack of newspapers I had used to wrap my welding trophies. I crumpled the paper into a ball. I placed it in the center of the steel floor away from the walls. I lit the corner. The fire caught. Yellow and orange flames licked up. It wasn't much. It was a tiny fire, a pathetic fire for a man who used to weld steel beams at 2,000 degrees. But I leaned over it, cupping my hands around the warmth. I watched the paper burn. I watched the faces in the newsprint turn to ash. I thought about the fireplace in Andre's house, the gas log fire that turned on with a switch. I thought about Tiffany sipping her cocoa. I thought about the down comforter on the guest bed I wasn't allowed to sleep in. "They think I am dead," I whispered to the rats. "Or they think I am in a shelter drinking soup." I warmed my hands until the fire burned down to embers. The darkness returned heavier than before. I crawled into the corner furthest from the door. I pulled my wool coat tight around me. I opened my suitcase and took out every shirt and sweater I owned, piling them on top of me like blankets. I lay my head on my red toolbox. It was hard and cold, but it was mine. Outside, the wind howled again, battering the side of the train car, but it couldn't get in. The iron tomb held strong. I closed my eyes. I could feel the numbness creeping back into my toes. I knew I had to wake up every hour to move my limbs, or I might never wake up again. "I am Winston Graves," I said aloud, my voice echoing in the hollow metal chamber. "I am 73 years old. I have no home. I have no money. But I have this box." I clenched my fist under the pile of clothes. "You made a mistake, Andre," I whispered into the dark. "You threw me away, but you forgot that scrap metal is the hardest thing to break. I will not die like a dog in the snow. I will live, and I will make you watch me live." The last ember of the newspaper faded, and the boxcar went black. But inside my chest, a different kind of fire was just starting to burn. I woke up because my own shivering was shaking the floorboards of the boxcar. The sun was up. A thin gray light filtered through the crack in the door I had pried open the night before. I was alive. That was the first victory. I sat up and my joints popped like firecrackers. My neck was stiff and my hip felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through it. But I was alive. I looked around my new kingdom. In the daylight, it looked even worse than it had in the dark. The floor was covered in a layer of grime that was a mix of oil dirt and rat droppings. There were old beer cans that had rusted through. There was a corner that smelled like a latrine. It was disgusting. It was a metal coffin filled with garbage. Most 73-year-old men would have looked at this mess and cried. Most men would have walked back to the city and begged for a cot in a crowded shelter. But I am not most men. I am Winston Graves. I spent 40 years fixing broken tracks in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a wrench and a bad attitude. I do not cry over dirt. I clean it. I stood up and wrapped my coat tighter around me. The air inside was freezing, but at least the wind was gone. Priority 1 was heat. Priority 2 was sanitation. Priority 3 was defense. I ate a stale granola bar I had found in the bottom of my coat pocket. It tasted like cardboard, but it stopped my stomach from growling. Then I grabbed my red toolbox and stepped out into the snow. The yards were silent in the morning light. It was a desolate landscape of rusted steel and white snow. But to a scavenger, it was a shopping mall. I walked toward the construction site I had passed the night before. It was about half a mile away across the tracks. They were building a new distribution center. Construction sites always have waste, and one man's waste is another man's survival. I found a gap in the fence. I slipped through, moving slow and keeping low. I raided the dumpster. I found gold. Not real gold, better than gold. I found sheets of pink fiberglass insulation that had been cut wrong and thrown away. I found a stack of plywood scraps. And then buried at the bottom under a pile of drywall I found it. A portable kerosene heater. It was an old red cylinder type. The cage was bent and the tank was dented. Someone had thrown it out because the igniter button was smashed. I pulled it out. I shook it. I could hear liquid sloshing inside. There was still fuel in it. I dragged my treasures back to the boxcar. It took me 3 trips. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but I did not stop. Work keeps you warm. Work keeps you sane. Back inside the boxcar, I set the heater on the floor. I opened my toolbox. My hands were swollen from the cold, but as soon as I picked up a screwdriver, they knew what to do. The instinct took over. I took the heater apart. I bypassed the broken igniter switch. I cleaned the fuel nozzle with a piece of wire. I straightened the wick. I took my lighter and touched the flame to the wick. Whoosh! A circle of blue flame jumped to life. A moment later, it turned orange. Heat. Real radiating heat. I held my hands over it and closed my eyes. It felt like a hug from God. Now that I had heat, I could work. I spent the next 4 hours cleaning. I used a piece of plywood as a shovel to scrape the filth off the floor. I shoved it all out the door. I organized my corner. I lined the walls with the pink insulation, tucking it between the steel ribs of the car. The temperature inside started to rise. It went from freezing to bearable. I was sweeping the floor near the door when I heard voices outside. "Yo, check it out! Smoke!" I froze. I moved to the door and peered out. 3 men were walking down the tracks. They were young, but their faces looked old. Their skin was gray and their eyes were hollow. Addicts. Desperate men looking for a place to get high or something to steal. They saw the open door of my boxcar. They saw the heat shimmering in the air. "Hey, old man," the tall one shouted. He was wearing a torn denim jacket over a hoodie. "Nice place you got there. We are coming in." I did not say a word. I stepped back into the shadows. I picked up the 24-inch wrecking bar. It was solid hardened steel. It weighed 5 pounds. The tall man climbed up the railroad tie I used as a step. His head popped into the doorway. He was smiling, a jagged smile of missing teeth. "Move over, Pops," he said. "We are moving in." I swung. I did not aim for his head. I am not a murderer. I aimed for the steel doorframe right next to his hand. Clang! The sound was deafening inside the metal box. The vibration traveled through the frame and must have stung his hand like a hornet. He yelped and dropped back down to the snow. "What the hell are you doing, you crazy old bat?" he screamed. I stepped into the doorway. I held the bar across my chest. I stood with my feet apart, balanced and ready. I looked down at them. I let them see my face. I let them see the face of a man who had welded steel on bridges 500 feet in the air. I let them see that I had absolutely nothing left to lose. This is a job site. I growled, my voice low and gravelly like a diesel engine. And you are trespassing. The tall man pulled a knife. It was a small switchblade. I'm going to cut you, old man, he hissed. I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. Son, I said, taking a step forward. I have a 5-pound steel bar and 40 years of swinging hammers. You have a toothpick. By the time you get close enough to scratch me, I will have shattered your collarbone and your kneecaps. Do you want to test the math? He hesitated. He looked at the bar. He looked at my eyes. He saw that I was not bluffing. He saw that I was hoping he would try. He folded the knife. You are crazy, he muttered. Keep your rust bucket. They walked away. They kept looking back, but they kept walking. I lowered the bar. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had defended my home. I needed food. The granola bar was long gone. I locked the door from the inside using a bolt I had rigged up. Then I climbed out the other side through a smaller maintenance hatch I had found. I walked toward the commercial district about a mile away. There was a bakery there that threw out stale bread in the afternoon. I found the dumpster behind the bakery. I was about to reach in when I saw I was not alone. A boy was there. He was maybe 19 years old. He had dark curly hair and skin the color of coffee with milk. He was wearing a thin windbreaker that was completely useless against the Chicago winter. He was digging through the trash with frantic, desperate movements. He pulled out a half-eaten bagel. He looked at it like it was a steak. He was about to take a bite when he saw me. He flinched. He dropped the bagel and backed away, holding his hands up. I'm sorry, he said, his accent thick. I go. Do not call police. He thought I was the owner, or maybe just another angry adult coming to chase him away. I looked at him. I saw his eyes. They were big and brown and terrified. They reminded me of Andre when he was little before the world and his wife got their claws into him. This boy was starving. I reached into my pocket. I had $3.50 in change. Wait, I said. The boy stopped. He was shivering so hard his teeth were clicking. Do not eat that, I said, pointing to the garbage bagel. It has mold on it. I walked past him into the bakery. I bought a day-old baguette for $2. I walked back out. I broke the bread in half. I held out the bigger half to him. Here, I said. The boy looked at the bread, then he looked at me. He took it slowly as if he expected me to snatch it back. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, mister. He tore into the bread, eating it in huge, wolfish bites. What is your name, son? I asked, chewing on my piece. Mateo, he said with his mouth full. You got a place to sleep, Mateo, I asked. He pointed vaguely toward the underpass. It is okay, he said. I have cardboard. Cardboard does not stop the wind, I said. I looked at him. I knew I should walk away. I barely had enough resources for myself. But Lucille always said that if you have more than you need, build a longer table, not a higher fence. I didn't have a table, but I had a warm box. If you get too cold, I said, I am in the old rail yard. The orange boxcar. I have a heater. Mateo looked surprised. You live in the train. I live where I survive, I said. I turned and walked away. I didn't know if he would follow, but I had planted a seed. I got back to the boxcar as the sun was setting. The heater was still humming. The air inside was toasty. It smelled of kerosene and old wood, but to me it smelled like victory. I decided to do one more sweep of the floor before bed. I was scraping a thick layer of hardened grease near the back wall when my scraper hit something hard. Clank. It sounded different than the rest of the floor. It sounded hollow. I scraped harder. Under the grease and dirt, I found a metal ring. It was a flush mount handle set into the floor. A trap door. My heart sped up. These old work cars sometimes had storage compartments under the floor for smuggling tools or parts. I grabbed the ring. It was rusted shut. I grabbed my wrecking bar. I jammed the tip into the seam. I leaned my weight on it. Crack. The seal broke. I pulled the handle. The heavy steel plate lifted up on hidden hinges. I shined my flashlight into the hole. It was a compartment about 4 feet wide and 2 feet deep. It was dry, and it was not empty. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were tools, but But not just any tools. These were vintage railroad tools from the 1950s. Heavy iron wrenches, a hydraulic jack, a pristine set of oxyacetylene torches with tanks that still had pressure gauges, and a box of heavy-duty welding rods. I reached down and touched the cold steel of the torch handle. It was beautiful. It was a master craftsman's set, the kind of tools you cannot buy anymore, the kind of tools that built this country. I sat back on my heels and laughed. It started as a chuckle and turned into a full belly laugh that echoed off the steel walls. They kicked me out. They took my house. They took my money. But the universe just gave me back my hands. I looked at the torch. With this, I could cut steel. With this, I could weld. With this, I could reinforce the doors. I could build a stove. I could turn this tin can into a fortress. I picked up the welding mask from the bottom of the hole. I wiped the dust off the glass. I put it on. The world turned dark green. I am not just surviving anymore, I whispered. I am building. And when the storm comes, and it is coming, I will be ready. I closed the hatch. I lay down on my scavenged mattress. For the first time in a month, I fell asleep with a smile on my face. I expected the boy to take the bread and run. That is what people do when they are starving. They grab what they can, and they disappear into the shadows to protect it. I sat by my heater watching the blue flame dance, waiting for the loneliness to settle back in. But 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the steel door. It was a rhythmic knock. Shave and a haircut. 2 bits. I opened the door. Mateo stood there in the snow. He was not alone. He was dragging a plastic sled behind him, the kind kids use to slide down hills, but this sled was piled high. There were wooden pallets, there was a bag of charcoal, there were cans of soup, and perched on top like a crown jewel was a thick wool rug rolled up and tied with twine. I found it, Mateo said, his teeth chattering but his eyes bright. Behind the furniture store. They threw it out because it has a stain. I looked at the boy. Then I looked at the sled. Come in, I said, stepping aside, before you freeze to death. That was how the alliance began. We did not sign a contract. We did not shake hands. We simply recognized that 2 freezing men have a better chance of seeing the spring than one. Mateo was fast. He was small and quick, and he knew the streets. He knew which restaurants threw out food at closing time. He knew which security guards slept on their shifts. He was the hunter-gatherer. And I was the builder. I opened the secret compartment in the floor. I pulled out the vintage oxyacetylene torch. I hooked up the gauges. I checked the pressure. It was low, but there was enough for what I needed. I put on the welding mask. Stand back, son, I told Mateo. Do not look at the light. It will burn your eyes. I lit the torch. The hiss of the gas was a familiar song. The blue flame roared to life, hot enough to melt steel. I went to work. I cut patches from the scrap metal we had scavenged. I welded them over the rust holes in the walls. I welded the door track so it would slide smooth and lock tight from the inside. I built a frame for a stove using an old oil drum Mateo found. For 3 days we worked. We did not talk much. Men working do not need to talk. The sound of the hammer and the hiss of the torch were our conversation. By Friday, the boxcar had transformed. It was no longer a rusted tin can. It was a home. We laid the wool rug on the floor over the layers of cardboard and insulation. It covered the cold steel and made the place quiet. We set up the oil drum stove in the center, venting the pipe out through a hole I cut in the roof. We burned the charcoal and the clean wood pallets. The heat was incredible. It radiated off the steel walls. I sat in my corner on my mattress drinking a cup of hot soup that Mateo had heated on the stove. It was tomato soup. It tasted like a 5-star meal. Mateo sat on the rug, cross-legged, organizing a pile of copper wire he had stripped to sell at the scrapyard. Winston, he asked, looking up, why are you here? You have hands. You have skills. You are not a junkie. I looked at the fire. I watched the flames lick the inside of the oil drum. My son, I said simply. He needed help. I gave him everything. And when I had nothing left, he gave me the door. Mateo nodded slowly. He did not ask for details. In the street, you learn not to dig too deep into a man's pain. My father left when I was 5, Mateo said, stripping a piece of wire. My mother worked 2 jobs, then she got sick. No insurance, we lost the apartment. She went to live with her sister in Ohio, but there was no room for me, so I stayed. He looked at me with those big dark eyes. Family is tricky, Winston. Sometimes they break your heart harder than any stranger. I nodded. He was 19, but he had the eyes of a 40-year-old. We need water, I said, standing up. The jug is empty. I will go, Mateo said, starting to get up. No, I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. You rest. You ran 10 miles today. I need to stretch my legs. My hip is stiffening up. I grabbed the empty 5-gallon jug in my coat. I walked out into the afternoon. The sky was a heavy bruised purple. The air was heavy. It felt like the sky was holding its breath, waiting to scream. There was a gas station about half a mile down the road near the entrance to the industrial park. They had an outdoor spigot they forgot to turn off for the winter. I walked along the edge of the road. I stayed in the ditch where the snow was packed down. I did not want to be seen. I was ashamed. Even now, with a warm boxcar and a full belly, I was ashamed that I was scavenging water like a stray dog. I reached the road. It was a desolate stretch of asphalt that ran between the abandoned factories and the highway. I was filling the jug when I saw a car coming. It was not a truck or a work van. It was a black SUV, a luxury model, shinier than anything that belonged in this neighborhood. I froze. I knew that car. It was Andre's SUV. My heart leaped into my throat. Had he come looking for me? Had he realized his mistake? Had Tiffany found a heart? I stood up. I stepped out of the ditch onto the shoulder of the road. I waved my hand. Andre, I whispered. The car slowed down. It was cruising slowly, looking for a place to turn or park. As it got closer, I saw him. Andre was driving. He was wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. But he was not alone. In the passenger seat was a woman. It was not Tiffany. This woman was young. She had bright blonde hair and she was laughing, touching Andre's arm. She was leaning over, whispering in his ear. My stomach dropped. He was not looking for me. He was looking for a secluded spot to cheat on his wife. He was using the industrial park as a motel. The irony was so sharp it cut me. He had kicked me out because I was a burden on his family, yet here he was destroying that family all by himself. The SUV rolled closer. Andre looked out the side window. He saw me. I was standing 10 feet away, holding a plastic water jug, wearing a dirty coat, my gray hair matted from the welding mask. Our eyes locked. For a second I saw shock. I saw recognition. Dad. I took a step forward. I didn't know what I wanted. Did I want to scream at him? Did I want to beg him? Did I want to warn him about the woman? But then I saw the change. I saw his eyes harden. I saw the shame flash across his face, followed instantly by panic. He looked at the woman next to him, then back at me. He made a choice. He looked straight ahead. He pressed a button on the door, and the tinted window rolled up, sealing him inside his warm leather cocoon. He hit the gas. The engine roared. The tires spun on the slush, spraying dirty gray ice onto my coat. The SUV shot forward, leaving me standing in the exhaust fumes. He didn't stop. He didn't even tap the brakes. He looked right at his father, his own flesh and blood, standing in a ditch in freezing weather, and he drove away. I stood there for a long time. The water jug was heavy in my hand, but I didn't feel the weight. I felt light. I felt empty. The first time he broke my heart was when he let Tiffany kick me out. That was weakness. That was fear. But this was erasure. He had looked at me and decided I did not exist. I watched the taillights disappear around a bend. "Goodbye, son," I whispered. "Bye, son," And this time I meant it. I walked back to the rail yard. My steps were slow. The cold seemed to bite deeper now, finding the cracks in my soul that the welding torch couldn't fix. When I got back to the boxcar, Mateo was listening to a small battery-operated radio he had scavenged. He looked up when I entered. He saw my face. "Winston," he asked. "What happened? Did you see a ghost?" I put the water jug down next to the stove. "Yes," I said, sitting heavily on the rug. "I saw a ghost in a black SUV. Mateo didn't push. He turned up the volume on the radio. "Listen to this. Winston," he said, his voice serious. "The weatherman is freaking out." I listened. The voice on the radio was crackling with static, but the panic was clear. "This is a severe weather emergency alert. The National Weather Service has upgraded the winter storm warning to a blizzard warning. Meteorologists are calling it a historic event. A bomb cyclone is forming over the Great Lakes. We are expecting wind gusts of 60 miles per hour and snowfall exceeding 30 inches in the next 24 hours. Temperatures will drop to 30 degrees below zero. This is a life-threatening event. Stay indoors, do not travel. If you are outside, find shelter immediately. 30 inches. 30 below. I looked at the walls of our boxcar. I looked at the patches I had welded. I looked at the small pile of charcoal we had left. It wasn't enough. If that forecast was right, this boxcar wasn't going to be a home. It was going to be a freezer. Mateo looked at me, fear wide in his eyes. "Winston," he said, 30 below. My cardboard friends under the bridge, they will die. I stood up. The pain of seeing Andre was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but I pushed it down. I locked it away in a steel box in my mind. "We need more wood," I said, my voice steady. "We need fuel. We need to seal the roof vent." "But the storm is coming tonight," Mateo said. "Then we have 3 hours," I said, grabbing my coat again. I looked at the vintage tools in the corner. I looked at the oxyacetylene tanks. "I am not dying here," I said. "Not tonight. Not while my son is warm in his bed living a lie." I grabbed the wrecking bar. "Let's go, Mateo. We are going to strip the construction site. We are going to take everything that isn't nailed down. And some things that are." We stepped out into the twilight. The wind had picked up. The snow had started to fall. Big, heavy flakes that swirled in the air like white ashes. The sky was black. The monster was coming. And we were the only thing standing in its way. The sky did not turn black that night. It turned a bruised, angry purple like a hematoma spreading across the skin of the world. The forecasters had called it a bomb cyclone, but to me it looked like the end of days. By 6 in the evening, the wind was already screaming. It did not sound like wind. It sounded like a freight train holding down its horn and never letting go. It was a constant deafening roar that vibrated the steel walls of our boxcar. Mateo and I huddled around the oil drum stove. We had spent the last 3 hours turning our metal box into a submarine. We used a tube of industrial caulking I had scavenged to seal every crack in the walls. We nailed heavy canvas tarps over the sliding door on the inside, creating an airlock to trap the heat. We shoved fiberglass insulation into the roof vents. We were sealed in. Outside, the world was vanishing. I looked through the tiny peephole I had drilled in the door. The snow was not falling down. It was flying sideways. It was moving so fast it looked like white lines of static on an old television screen. The temperature was dropping like a stone. The thermometer I had hung by the door read 10 degrees below zero, then 15, then 20. Inside it was 40 degrees, not warm but survivable. The red kerosene heater hummed a steady rhythm and the wood stove crackled. We sat on the wool rug, wrapped in every layer of clothing we owned. Mateo was shivering. He was staring at the stove, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Winston," he whispered. "The wind. It sounds like it wants to tear the roof off. It wants to," I said, my voice calm. "But it won't. This car is 50 tons of American steel, son. It has seen worse than this. It has crossed mountains. It has sat in deserts. It is not going anywhere." I handed him a cup of hot water with a bouillon cube dissolved in it. "Drink," I said. "Keep your engine running." I tried to sound confident, but deep down I was worried. The cold was aggressive. It was seeking out every weakness. I could feel it radiating through the floorboards. The metal walls were starting to frost over on the inside, turning white with ice crystals. I thought about Andre. I wondered if he was safe in his big house. I wondered if his generator had kicked on. I wondered if he was sitting by his fireplace with his mistress or his wife, drinking wine and laughing at the storm. The thought made a bitter taste rise in my throat. He had left me to die in this. If I hadn't found this boxcar, if I hadn't had my tools, I would be a frozen lump of meat in a snowbank by now. The wind gusted harder, slamming against the side of the train car with a metallic boom. The whole structure shuddered. The flame in the kerosene heater flickered. Mateo pulled his knees to his chest. "Do you think anyone is out there?" he asked. "Only fools and the dead," I said. I went to the peephole again. I needed to keep watch. I don't know why. Maybe it was the old rail worker instinct. You always watch the line. The visibility was zero. I could barely see the trees 10 feet away. The industrial park was a white void. The road that ran parallel to the tracks about 50 yards away was invisible. I was about to turn away when I saw it. Two beams of light cutting through the whiteout. Headlights. Some idiot was driving. I squinted. The lights were erratic. They were bouncing up and down, swerving left and right. The driver was fighting the wind and the black ice. "Who is driving in this?" I muttered. The lights got closer. I could make out the shape of the vehicle now. It was a silver sedan, low to the ground. Expensive. It looked like a Mercedes. It was moving too fast. Way too fast for the conditions. The wind must have caught it. As I watched the car hit a patch of ice near the curve where the road dipped toward the ravine that separated the street from the rail yard, the car spun. It happened in slow motion. The tail lights swung around. The headlights swept across the trees like searchlights. The car slid sideways off the road. It hit the berm of snowplow debris and launched into the air. It flipped. Once, twice. It crashed down into the ravine, landing upside down in the deep snow just 30 yards from my boxcar. Crunch! The sound of metal crumpling was audible even over the wind. The headlights flickered and went out. Then the horn started honking. A continuous blaring note. Honk! Mateo jumped up. "What was that?" "A car," I said, grabbing my flashlight. "A car just went into the ditch." I unlatched the inner tarp. I unlocked the heavy steel door. "Winston." "What are you doing?" Mateo asked, his voice rising in panic. "I have to look," I said. I slid the door open just a crack. The wind hit me like a physical punch to the face. It sucked the air right out of my lungs. The cold was unimaginable. It felt like burning. My skin instantly tightened. I shined my flashlight into the dark. The beam caught the silver undercarriage of the overturned car. It was resting on its roof deep in the snow. The wheels were still spinning. I saw movement inside, a hand pressing against the frosted glass of the driver's side window. "They are alive," I shouted over the wind. I slammed the door shut and latched it. I turned to Mateo. "I have to go out there." Mateo stood up. He grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "No, Winston. Are you crazy? Look at the thermometer. It is 30 below zero. The wind chill is probably 50 below. You will die in 5 minutes." "Someone is trapped." "Mateo," I said, pulling away. "The car is crushed. They cannot get out. If the engine stops, they will freeze to death in an hour, or the fumes will kill them." "It is not your problem," Mateo screamed. He was terrified. He was looking at me like I was his father leaving him again. "You are old, Winston. You can barely walk on a good day. Out there in that snow, you will fall. You will never get back up." He was right. Logic said he was right. I was 73, I had a bad hip, I had arthritis, I had been discarded by society. Why should I risk my life for someone rich enough to drive a Mercedes in a blizzard? It was probably someone like Tiffany, someone soft, someone who looked down on people like me. "Let them call 911, Mateo said. "Let the fire department come." "No one is coming," I said, grabbing my red toolbox. "Look at the road. No plows, no ambulances. The lines are down." "We are it, Mateo. We are the only help there is." I opened the box. I took out my heavy wrecking bar. I took a hammer. I took a seatbelt cutter I had kept from my old truck. I wrapped my scarf around my face until only my eyes were visible. I put on 2 pairs of gloves. I pulled my hat down low. "Winston." "Please," Mateo begged, tears standing in his eyes. "Do not leave me here alone." I stopped. I looked at the boy. I put a gloved hand on his shoulder. "I am coming back, son," I said, my voice muffled by the wool. "I promise. But my wife Lucille, she used to say that you cannot call yourself a man if you watch a neighbor suffer and do nothing, even if that neighbor is a stranger." I checked my pockets. Flashlight, lighter, knife. "Lock the door behind me," I ordered. "Do not open it unless you hear 3 knocks. If I am not back in 20 minutes. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. I turned to the door. I took a deep breath of the warm air, the air that smelled of oil and life. Then I slid the steel door open. The monster was waiting. The wind roared as I stepped out onto the railroad tie step. It tried to push me back inside. It tried to knock me down. I lowered my head. I leaned into the gale. I jumped down into the snow. It was waist deep. I looked back. Mateo was standing in the opening looking small and fragile. "Lock it!" I shouted. He slid the door shut. I heard the latch click. I was alone in the white hell. I turned toward the ravine. The horn of the Mercedes was still blaring a mournful, desperate sound. It was calling me. I gripped the wrecking bar. I lifted my heavy boots, one by one, trudging through the drifts. "I am Winston Graves," I chanted inside my head, fighting the cold that was already biting through my coat. "I am a builder. I am a fixer. And tonight I am not dying." I moved toward the wreck, disappearing into the storm. 30 yards. That was the distance between the safety of my iron tomb and the wreckage in the ravine. On a summer day, I could have walked it in 30 seconds. But in a blizzard with the wind screaming at 60 miles an hour, 30 yards feels like 30 miles. The snow was waist deep. It was like wading through wet cement that was actively trying to kill me. Every step was a battle. I had to lift my leg high, fighting the drag of the drift, then stomp it down to find purchase on the frozen ground beneath. My lungs burned. The air was so cold it felt like I was inhaling glass shards. I kept my head down, protecting my face with the wool scarf, but the wind found every gap. It stung my eyes until they watered, and then the tears froze on my lashes, sealing them shut. I had to stop every few steps to wipe the ice away, just to see where I was going. The car was a silver shape in the darkness. It was resting on its roof, half buried in the snow. The headlights had died, but the horn was still blaring a weak, dying note that sounded like a wounded animal. As I got closer, I smelled it. The sharp, stinging scent of gasoline. It was leaking. If that gas hit a hot engine part or a spark, this whole ravine would turn into a fireball. I had to move fast. I slid down the embankment, losing my footing and tumbling the last 10 feet. I slammed into the side of the overturned Mercedes. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I lay there for a second, gasping, staring at the undercarriage of the luxury car. It was pristine, no rust. This car cost more than I had made in 10 years at the rail yard. And now it was just a piece of scrap metal in a ditch. I pulled myself up. I shined my flashlight into the driver's side window. The glass was cracked but holding. Inside I saw a woman. She was hanging upside down, held in place by her seatbelt. Her blonde hair was hanging down, covering her face like a curtain. She was not moving. One of her arms was dangling at an odd angle. I banged on the glass with my fist. "Can you hear me?" I shouted. No answer. I tried the door handle. It was locked. And even if it wasn't, the frame was twisted from the impact and the ice had already sealed the seams. It was frozen shut. I grabbed my wrecking bar. I jammed the flat end into the gap between the door and the B-pillar. I pulled. I hauled on it with everything I had. My boots slipped in the snow. The metal groaned, but it did not budge. The alloy of the car was strong and the ice was like concrete. I cursed. I needed heat. I reached into my deep coat pocket and pulled out the small handheld propane torch I used for thawing frozen pipes. It wasn't an oxyacetylene rig, but it was hot enough. I clicked the igniter. The blue flame hissed to life, dancing wildly in the wind. I cupped my hand around it, shielding it with my body. I held the flame against the locking mechanism inside the door jamb. The paint bubbled and peeled. The ice hissed, turning to steam. I counted to 30. My hand was shaking. The smell of gas was stronger now. I was holding an open flame next to a fuel leak. It was madness, but it was the only way. I dropped the torch into the snow to extinguish it. I grabbed the wrecking bar again. I jammed it into the heated gap. I am a welder. I screamed into the wind. I know metal, and metal moves for me. I threw my weight against the bar. I felt the steel flex. I felt the lock give way. With a screech that sounded like a banshee, the door popped open. Gravity took over. The door swung out and hung there. I crawled inside the cabin. It was upside down and disorienting. The smell of expensive leather mixed with the copper smell of blood. I brushed the hair away from the woman's face. She was pale. Her lips were turning blue. She was breathing, but it was shallow. Hypothermia was setting in. I saw her leg. Her left leg was trapped under the steering column. It was twisted. The tibia was broken. I could see the tenting in her expensive slacks where the bone was pushing against the skin. I took out my seatbelt cutter. I braced myself. "I am going to cut you down, miss," I whispered. "It is going to hurt." I sliced the belt. She fell. I caught her, but she was dead weight. She let out a groan of pain but didn't wake up. I dragged her out of the car. She was small, but in the snow, dead weight feels like lead. I pulled her onto the snowbank away from the leaking gas. Now came the impossible part. I had to get her back up the ravine. I couldn't carry her in my arms. The snow was too deep. I took off my heavy wool coat. The wind hit me instantly, biting through my flannel shirt like teeth. I laid the coat on the snow. I rolled her onto it. I tied the sleeves around her chest, making a sled. I grabbed the collar of the coat. I leaned forward. I started to pull. One step. My hips screamed. My arthritis flared white-hot. 2 steps. I slipped, falling to my knees. I crawled. I was 73 years old, dragging a stranger up a hill in a blizzard. Every instinct in my body told me to stop, to lie down, to die. But I heard a voice in my head. It was my drill sergeant from basic training 50 years ago. Graves, you do not stop until the job is done. Pain is just information. Ignore it. I crawled. I dug my fingers into the frozen mud. I dragged her inch by inch. I don't know how long it took. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. Time stopped existing. There was only the wind and the weight. I reached the top of the embankment. I saw the orange glow of my boxcar through the swirling snow. It looked like a lighthouse. I dragged her across the tracks. I reached the door. I grabbed the heavy iron handle of the wrecking bar I had dropped earlier and banged on the steel door 3 times. Clang, clang, clang. The door slid open instantly. Mateo was there. He looked terrified. When he saw me without my coat dragging a body, he gasped. "Help me," I wheezed. We pulled her up the railroad tie ramp. It took both of us heaving and straining until we tumbled onto the floor of the boxcar. Mateo slammed the door shut and engaged the latch. The wind was gone. The silence of the boxcar was sudden and shocking. I lay on the floor for a moment, my chest heaving, my heart fluttering like a trapped bird. I was dizzy. I was close to passing out. Winston Mateo cried, kneeling beside me. "You are freezing. Your lips are purple." "I am fine," I gasped, sitting up. "Check her. Check the lady." I crawled over to the woman. In the light of the kerosene heater and the oil drum stove, I could see the damage. She was in her 30s, rich. Her clothes were tailored, but right now she was just a broken human being. She was shivering violently, the tremors racking her small body. "We need to warm her up," I said, my voice steadying as the adrenaline leveled out, "but not too fast. If we warm her too fast, it will shock her heart." I grabbed the scissors from my first aid kit. I cut her pant leg open. Her lower leg was swollen and purple, a nasty break. "Mateo, bring me those cedar shims," I shouted, pointing to the woodpile. "And the duct tape." I channeled the medic training I had received half a century ago. Immobilize the joint, reduce the swelling. I placed the wooden shims on either side of her leg. I wrapped them tight with duct tape, creating a rigid splint. It wasn't pretty. It was a field repair, but it would hold the bone in place. She moaned when I tightened the tape, her eyes fluttering, but she didn't wake. We stripped off her wet outer layers. I took every dry blanket we had and piled them on her. I took the wool rug from the floor and wrapped it around her like a burrito. I moved her closer to the heater, but not too close. "Mateo, make tea," I ordered. "Sweet. Lots of sugar. She will need the glucose when she wakes up." I put my own coat back on. It was wet on the outside, but the lining was still dry. I sat next to her, checking her pulse. It was weak, but steady. I looked at her face. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. She looked like the kind of woman who lived in the houses Andre desperately wanted to buy. The kind of woman who would never look at a man like me unless she needed something. Well, tonight she needed a welder. We sat there for an hour. The storm raged outside, battering the walls, but the boxcar held. My heat shielding worked. The temperature inside held steady at 50 degrees. Finally, she stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. She took a deep, jagged breath. She opened her eyes. They were blue, sharp, and confused. She looked up at the ceiling. She expected the interior of a luxury car or maybe a hospital room. Instead, she saw rusted steel ribs. She saw pink fiberglass insulation tucked between the beams. She saw a lantern hanging from a hook made of bent wire. She tried to move and gasped as the pain in her leg registered. "Easy, miss," I said softly, leaning over her. "Do not move. Your leg is broken. I splinted it." She turned her head. She looked at me. An old black man with wild gray hair wearing a dirty flannel shirt. She looked at Mateo, a young boy in a hoodie stirring a pot on an oil drum stove. She looked around the room. She saw the neat stacks of firewood. The tools hung precisely on the wall in size order. The floor swept clean. The warm glow of the heater. It was a pile of junk, but it was organized with the precision of a military barracks. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Am I dead? No, ma'am, I said, handing her a tin cup of tea. You are in a boxcar, in the Chicago rail yards. Your car went off the road. A boxcar, she repeated. She tried to sit up, bracing herself on her elbows. She looked at the makeshift home again. Her eyes widened. She saw the ingenuity of it, the way I had welded the patches, the way I had vented the stove. You live here? She asked, incredulous. I took a sip of my own tea. The warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the last of the chill. Yes, ma'am, I said. It is not the Ritz, but it keeps the snow out. She looked at me for a long time. She looked at my hands, the scarred, calloused hands that had pulled her from a wreck, hands that had been thrown away by my own son. Who are you? She asked. I am Winston Graves, I said, and you are safe. She took the cup. Her hands were shaking, but she drank. Elena, she said softly. My name is Elena. She looked around the metal box again, and for the first time I saw something other than fear in her eyes. I saw respect. You built this? She asked, looking at the welded door latch. I fix things, Elena, I said. That is what I do. She nodded slowly, and then her eyes drifted shut as the exhaustion took over. Rest now, I said. The storm isn't going anywhere, and neither are we. I watched her sleep. I didn't know who she was or why she was driving in a blizzard. I didn't know that pulling her out of that car was going to change my life more than winning the lottery. All I knew was that tonight the welder hadn't just fixed a door, he had saved a life. And that made the cold feel a little less bitter. The storm raged for 72 hours, 3 days of wind that sounded like a jet engine parked directly outside our door. 3 days of snow piling up so high it covered the bottom third of the boxcar, creating a natural insulation that actually helped keep the heat in. Inside, our iron lung time seemed to stop. We fell into a rhythm. Mateo kept the fire fed. I changed the dressing on the lady's leg and checked her circulation. We ate soup, we drank tea, we waited. It is a strange thing to be trapped in a small space with strangers. You stop being strangers very quickly. The pretense falls away. When you are sharing a bucket for a toilet and splitting a can of beans, dignity takes on a different meaning. It becomes about honesty. It becomes about kindness. The lady Elena was tough. I will give her that. Most people with a broken tibia would be screaming or passed out. She just gritted her teeth. She watched us with those sharp blue eyes, assessing, analyzing, processing. She was a lawyer, all right. You could see the gears turning in her head, even when she was in pain. On the second night, the wind died down just enough for us to hear the crackle of the wood in the stove. Mateo was asleep in the corner, curled up like a cat. Elena was propped up against my red toolbox, which I had padded with a sweater. Winston, she said. Her voice was stronger now. Why are you here? I looked up from the piece of copper wire I was twisting. I told you, I said. I have nowhere else to go. No, she said, shaking her head. I do not mean why are you homeless. I mean, why are you? You are not an addict. You are not mentally ill. You are an educated man, Winston. I can hear it in your voice. You are a master craftsman. Men like you do not just fall through the cracks unless someone pushes them. I put the wire down. I looked at the orange glow of the heater. I wasn't pushed, I said softly. I jumped, because I thought I was catching someone. Tell me, she said. Please. It helps to talk. And frankly, I need a distraction from the fact that my leg feels like it is on fire. So I told her. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not curse Andre or call Tiffany names. I just laid out the facts like I was laying track. One rail after another, I told her about the house on Dorchester Avenue. I told her about Lucille and how we paid off the mortgage 5 years early. I told her about Andre's gambling. I told her about the debt. I told her about the sale and the promise of the in-law suite. And I told her about the night on the porch when the door closed and the lock clicked. I sold my sanctuary to save my son, I said simply. I thought it was a trade, my comfort for his life. But it turns out it wasn't a trade. It was a donation. He took the gift and he threw away the wrapping paper. I am the wrapping paper. Elena listened in silence. She watched my face intently. When I mentioned Tiffany's name, I saw her eyes narrow. A flicker of recognition passed over her face, but she didn't interrupt. When I finished, I picked up my cup of tea. It was lukewarm but wet. So here I am, I said, living in a tin can, eating soup with a kid I met by a dumpster. And you know what, Elena? I sleep better here than I did in that motel. At least here the cold is honest. Elena shifted her leg and winced. "Your daughter-in-law?" she said slowly. "Her name is Tiffany Graves." "Yes," I said. "Do you know her?" Elena let out a short, humorless laugh. She reached for her purse, which Mateo had salvaged from the wreck. She pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "Elena Sterling, attorney at law, urban planning and zoning litigation." "I know her," Elena said. "In fact, I was driving out here in this blizzard to find evidence against her." "Against Tiffany?" I asked. "Winston," Elena said, leaning forward, her eyes intense. "Tiffany is not just a realtor. She is a broker for a development firm called Apex Capital. They buy distressed properties and turn them into strip malls and condos." I nodded. "That is what she said. She said they are leveraged to the hilt." "They are," Elena said. "And right now they are trying to close the biggest deal of their lives. They are trying to sell a massive parcel of land to a national retail chain. They want to build a mega mall right here." "Right here?" I asked, looking around the boxcar. "Yes," Elena said. "This rail yard, the yards, they call it the Crystal Creek Project. Tiffany is the lead broker. She stands to make a commission of nearly $500,000 if the sale goes through next month. $500,000. My head spun. Andre owed $200,000. If Tiffany closed this deal, she could pay off the debt and still be rich. And yet she had forced me to sell my house first. Why? Because she is greedy, I realized. She didn't want to use her money to fix Andre's mess. She wanted to use mine. "But there is a problem," Elena continued. "A legal problem. That is why I am involved. I represent a historical preservation society that is trying to block the demolition. We believe this land has historical significance. But more importantly, we believe Tiffany does not have the right to sell it. Why not, I asked. It is abandoned." "It is abandoned physically," Elena said. "But legally, land is never truly abandoned. Someone owns it." Tiffany claims she found the title. She claims the land was seized by the city for back taxes and bought by Apex Capital at auction. But I found discrepancies in the paperwork. "Discrepancies. Forgeries," Elena corrected. "I think she forged the deed transfer. I think she is trying to sell land she does not own, but I cannot prove it. The original title dates back to 1955. The railroad company that owned this yard. The Great Northern and Pacific went bankrupt in the 70s. Their assets were dissolved. But this specific spur track, this switching yard, was held in a private trust." "A trust?" I asked. "Yes," Elena said. "A blind trust set up by the founder of the railroad. He was an eccentric man, a tycoon who hated the government and hated banks. When the company went under, he hid his favorite assets in a trust called the Iron Horse Fund. But nobody knows who the beneficiary is. The paperwork was lost in a fire at the county clerk's office 20 years ago." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Without that paperwork, Tiffany will win. She has the city council in her pocket. She will bulldoze this yard next month. She will bulldoze this boxcar, Winston, and she will build a parking lot over your home." I sat there listening to the wind howl outside. It all connected. Tiffany was a predator. She ate houses. She ate land. She ate people. She had eaten my life, and now she was coming to eat my sanctuary. But as Elena spoke, a memory triggered in my mind. 1955, the Great Northern and Pacific. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked over to the secret compartment in the floor, the one I had pried open 3 days ago. "Winston, what are you doing?" Elena asked. I opened the hatch. I pulled out the vintage welding torch. I pulled out the box of tools. "You said the owner was eccentric," I said. "You said he hated banks." "Yes," Elena said. I picked up a heavy brass plaque that was sitting at the bottom of the tool chest. I had seen it when I first opened the hole, but I hadn't paid much attention to it. I thought it was just a manufacturer's label. I wiped the grease off the brass with my thumb. "The Great Northern and Pacific Railroad," I read aloud. "Property of the President's Private Reserve." Elena's eyes went wide. "Let me see that." I handed her the plaque. She angled it toward the light. "My God," she whispered. "This is the seal. This proves this car belonged to the private reserve." I knelt down on the floor. I shone my flashlight into the hole again. I looked deeper this time. Under the tools, under the false bottom of the tool chest, there was a metal tube. A document tube, like the kind architects use for blueprints. It was sealed with wax. Red wax. I pulled it out. "Winston," Elena said, her voice trembling. "Do not open that. If that is what I think it is, the seal has to be broken by a judge or it might be inadmissible. I held the tube. It felt heavy. It felt like destiny. You said nobody knows who the beneficiary is, I said, looking at her. No, Elena said. The name was lost. I stood up. I walked over to the wall of the boxcar near the door. The steel there was thick. It was painted over with 50 years of industrial orange paint. But if you looked closely, if you ran your hand over the metal, you could feel ridges. When I was an apprentice welder, I said my voice low back in 1970. I worked on the refurbishment of this yard. The old-timers used to talk about the founder. They said he had a favorite car, a car he kept his personal tools in, a car he said he would retire in if the world ever went to hell. I grabbed a wire brush from my toolbox. They said he welded his name into the frame, I said. Not stamped it, welded it. Deep, so it could never be erased. I started to scrub the wall. The orange paint flaked away. Orange dust filled the air. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Under the paint, the steel gleamed. And there, raised up in beautiful, perfect welding beads, was a signature. It wasn't just a name, it was a work of art. The molten metal had been laid down with a steady hand, a hand that knew fire and iron. Elena gasped. I shone the flashlight on the letters. Thaddeus Kane. That is him, Elena whispered. Thaddeus Kane, the railroad baron. And underneath the name, I said, pointing to a second line of text. There was a date, 1955, and below that a phrase. To the holder of this key lies the kingdom. I looked at the tube in my hand, then I looked at the tool chest key I had found in the compartment. This isn't just a boxcar, Elena, I said. This is the trust. The car itself is the legal vessel. The documents are inside. Elena looked at me. Then she looked at the tube. A slow smile spread across her face. It was a shark smile, but this time the shark was on my side. Winston, she said, if those papers are the original deed to the trust, and if they are bearer bonds or bearer titles, then whoever holds them owns the yard, I finished. Elena nodded. And Tiffany Graves, she said, doesn't own a single grain of dirt in this zip code. I looked at the tube. I looked at the name Thaddeus Kane welded into the wall. My son kicked me out, I said. He sent me here to die. He thought he was sending me to a graveyard. I gripped the tube tight. But he sent me to the bank. Elena laughed. It was a joyous sound that cut through the gloom of the storm. Winston, she said, when this snow clears, we are going to have a very interesting conversation with your daughter-in-law. I looked at the door. The wind was still howling, but it didn't sound like a monster anymore. It sounded like a fanfare. Let it snow, I said. We have plenty of soup. And I think I have a lot of reading to do. The silence that followed the storm was louder than the wind had ever been. For 3 days, the world had been screaming, and now suddenly it was holding its breath. The sun broke through the clouds on the 4th morning. It was a blinding white light that reflected off the miles of pristine snow, turning the rail yard into a glittering sea of diamonds. It looked beautiful. It looked peaceful. But I knew better. The snow was just a sheet pulled over a corpse. Underneath, the world was still frozen and hard and unforgiving. The plows came first. We heard them in the distance, grinding along the main road, their yellow lights flashing against the morning sky. Then came the ambulance. Mateo had walked 2 miles in waist-deep snow to the nearest working payphone to call 911 for Elena. When the paramedics arrived, they had to use a sled to get down the embankment. They looked at our boxcar with wide eyes. They looked at the welded patches, the stovepipe puffing smoke, and the organized interior. One of them shook my hand. He said he had never seen anything like it. He said I should be dead. I helped them load Elena onto the stretcher. Her leg was stabilized thanks to my splint, but she was weak. Before they strapped her in, she grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Do not lose that tube, Winston, she whispered so low the paramedics couldn't hear. That is your life. That is your shield. Hide it. I promised. I will be back, she said, as soon as I can walk, or maybe sooner. Do not let them take this ground. I watched the ambulance drive away, its siren wailing a lonely song in the empty air. Then I was alone again, just me and Mateo and the iron tomb. We spent the rest of the day hiding the evidence. I took the metal tube with the Thaddeus Kane documents, and I wrapped it in 3 layers of oilcloth. I didn't put it back in the floor compartment. That was the first place a thief would look. Instead, I climbed up the side of the boxcar and wedged it into the hollow void of the main roof beam. You would need a ladder and a torch to find it. Mateo was nervous. He kept pacing back and forth, rubbing his hands together. "They are coming, Winston," he said. "The roads are clear. The shark lady, she is coming." "I know, son," I said, sharpening the edge of my wrecking bar with a file. "Let her come." I wasn't afraid. Fear is for people who have something to lose. I had already lost my house, my money, and my family. All I had left was a metal box and a secret that could bring down an empire. I felt a cold calm settling in my chest. It was the same feeling I used to get before welding a high-pressure steam pipe. You focus, you steady your hand, you wait for the spark. It happened the next afternoon. I was outside chopping the last of the wooden pallets for the stove. The air was crisp and cold, about 20 degrees, a heat wave compared to the blizzard. I heard the engine before I saw the car. It wasn't the rumble of a plow or the rattle of a truck. It was the smooth purr of a high-performance engine. I stopped chopping. I rested the axe against my leg. "Here we go," I whispered. The black SUV pulled up to the edge of the ravine. It was the same car Andre had been driving when he left me in the ditch. It looked out of place against the industrial ruin. It looked like a hearse arriving for a funeral. 2 doors opened. Andre stepped out of the driver's side. He was wearing a heavy parka with a fur hood and expensive winter boots that looked like they had never touched mud. He looked pale. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept looking at the ground, kicking at the snow. Then Tiffany stepped out. She was wearing a white coat that matched the snow. She had tall leather boots and dark sunglasses. She looked like an ice queen. She looked at the rail yard with a sneer of absolute disgust, curling her lip as if the very air here offended her. They picked their way down the embankment. The snow had been packed down by the paramedics, so the walking was easy. I didn't move. I stood by my woodpile. I let them come to me. Tiffany stopped 10 feet away. She pushed her sunglasses up onto her head. Her blue eyes were sharp and cold. She looked at the boxcar. She looked at the smoke rising from the chimney. She looked at me. "Well," she said. Her voice was light and conversational, which made it even more terrifying. "You are still alive. I must admit, Winston, I am surprised. I had a bet with Andre that you would be a popsicle by now." I looked at Andre. He flinched. "Is that true, son?" I asked. "You bet on my life." Andre looked up. His face was twisted with guilt, but underneath the guilt was fear. Fear of her. "Dad," he mumbled, We came to check on you. The storm was bad. We wanted to make sure you were okay." "Liar," Tiffany snapped. She didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes on me. "Shut up, Andre. We did not come to check on him. We came to handle business." She reached into her oversized designer bag. She pulled out a roll of orange tape and a stack of papers. "This property," she said, gesturing to the yard with a gloved hand, "is scheduled for demolition in 3 days. The Crystal Creek project is breaking ground. We have the permits. We have the investors. The only thing we do not have is a clean site." She walked closer to the boxcar. She slapped a piece of paper against the rusted steel door. It was an adhesive sticker. It stuck fast to the cold metal. "Notice of eviction." It read in big black letters. "Unsafe structure. Condemned." "You are squatting," Winston, Tiffany said. "This is criminal trespassing. I was lenient before because you are family, but my patience has run out. You are a liability. You are a stain on this development." She looked at the patches I had welded. She laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. "Look at this," she mocked. "You think you are MacGyver, welding scrap metal to a piece of junk. It is pathetic. You are pathetic." I did not speak. I just watched her. "You have 24 hours, she said. "Grab your trash bag or your toolbox or whatever garbage you are clinging to and get out. Go to the shelter. Go to the gutter. I do not care. But if you are here tomorrow morning, I am calling the police. And then I am calling the bulldozers. I will bury this tin can with you inside it." Andre stepped forward. "Dad, please. Just go. She means it. The deal is worth millions, Dad. We cannot let you mess this up." I looked at my son. He was begging again, just like he begged for the money to pay his gambling debts. He was a hollow man, a shell filled with fear and greed. "You sold me out, Andre," I said, my voice low and steady. "You sold your father for a heated seat in a luxury car. I did what I had to do." Andre whined. "You were drowning, Dad. You were going to drag us down with you." "No," I said. "I was the one holding you up." Tiffany stepped between us. She poked me in the chest with a manicured finger. It felt like a knife point. Listen to me, old man, she hissed. You are done. You are finished. You are nothing but a leech. I sucked the equity out of your house, and now you want to suck the life out of my deal. Well, the bank is closed. You are dry. Just die already. Do us all a favor and freeze. It is cleaner that way. Something snapped inside me. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the sound of a cable breaking under too much tension. It was the sound of the last thread of patience disintegrating. I looked at her finger on my chest. I looked at the orange sticker on my door. I looked at the fear in Mateo's eyes peeking out from behind the woodpile. I reached down. My hand closed around the handle of my wrecking bar. The 24-inch hexagonal steel bar I had used to break into this car. It was heavy. It was cold. It was real. I lifted it. I didn't raise it to strike. I wasn't going to hit a woman, even a devil like her. I raised it like a staff, like a scepter. I slammed the tip down onto the frozen ground. Thud. The vibration traveled through the earth. I straightened my back. I stood to my full height. I am 6 feet 2 inches tall. My back hurts. My knees ache, but in that moment I felt 10 feet tall. I felt like the iron I had worked with my whole life. Get off my property, I said. Tiffany blinked. She took a step back, surprised by the sudden change in my demeanor. Excuse me, she laughed nervously. Your property. You possess nothing, Winston. You are a squatter. I took a step forward. I dragged the tip of the iron bar across a rock, creating a spark. I said, get off my land. I looked at Andre. And you? I growled. Take your wife and get in your car, because if you take one more step toward this train, if you touch one bolt on my home, I will forget that you are my son. I raised the bar, pointing it at the Mercedes. I am a welder. I shouted, my voice booming across the ravine. I tear steel apart for a living. You think a notice on a piece of paper scares me. I have cut through beams thicker than your skull. Tiffany looked at the bar. Then she looked at my eyes. She saw the fire there. It wasn't the weak, flickering flame of an old man. It was the blue, hot flame of an oxy-acetylene torch. She realized in that moment that she had pushed too far. She realized that you can strip a man of his money, but you cannot strip him of his hands. She grabbed Andre's arm. Let us go, she hissed. He is crazy. The cold has rotted his brain. We will come back with the police. We will come back with guns. They turned and scrambled up the embankment. They slipped in the snow, ruining their expensive boots. They looked like rats fleeing a sinking ship. I watched them get into the SUV. I watched them speed away, tires spinning in the slush. I stood there holding my iron bar, breathing the cold, clean air. They were coming back. I knew that. The war had just started. But as I looked at the eviction notice on my door, I didn't feel fear. I reached out and ripped the sticker off, crumpling it in my fist. This is not a condemnation, I whispered. This is a declaration of war, and Winston Graves does not lose wars. I turned to Mateo, who was staring at me with awe. Put the kettle on, son, I said. We need to fortify the perimeter. The sharks are circling. But they forgot that sharks can't swim on dry land, and on this land, I am the captain. The ground didn't just shake, it trembled with a low-frequency vibration that rattled the fillings in my teeth. It was 7 a.m. I was brewing coffee over the oil drum stove, trying to warm my hands before the day began. Mateo was still asleep under his pile of blankets. But when the spoon rattled against the side of my tin cup, I knew the war had arrived. I knew that sound. I had worked around heavy machinery for 40 years. That was the sound of a diesel engine with enough torque to move a mountain. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed my wrecking bar. Stay inside, I told Mateo, who was sitting up rubbing sleep from his terrified eyes. Lock the door behind me. I stepped out into the freezing morning air. The sun was bright and harsh, reflecting off the snow like broken glass. And there it was, a massive yellow bulldozer sitting at the top of the ravine. Its engine was idling, sending plumes of black smoke into the pristine blue sky. It looked like a prehistoric beast, waiting for the signal to attack. Standing next to it was a police cruiser. The lights were flashing silently, and standing in front of the cruiser wearing a fur coat that probably cost more than my entire pension was Tiffany. She saw me. She smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of an executioner who enjoys their work. She waved her hand, signaling the bulldozer operator. The machine lurched forward. The tracks clanked and squealed as it began to descend the snowy embankment. It crushed the bushes I had used for kindling. It flattened the snow. It was coming straight for my boxcar. I ran. My bad hip screamed. but I ran. I positioned myself directly in the path of the machine. I stood 10 feet in front of the boxcar, planting my feet wide in the snow. I held my wrecking bar across my chest like a knight holding a sword. "Stop!" I roared. The driver of the bulldozer hesitated. He was a working man, probably a union guy just like I used to be. He saw an old man standing in the way. He didn't want to kill me. He idled the engine. Tiffany screamed from the top of the hill. "Do not stop. Keep going. He will move." The police officer walked down the slope. He was young, nervous. He had his hand on his belt near his taser. "Sir," the officer shouted, "you need to step away from the structure. We have a court order for demolition. This is an unsafe dwelling." I looked at the officer. "Unsafe," I shouted back. "This car has stood here for 50 years. It survived a blizzard that flipped a Mercedes-Benz. It is the safest thing in this county." "It is condemned property," the officer said, stepping closer. "You are trespassing. Ma'am Graves has the deed. She has the permits. If you do not move, I will have to arrest you for obstruction." I looked at Tiffany. She was walking down the hill now, her boots crunching in the snow. She stopped behind the officer, safely out of reach of my bar. "Arrest him," she said. "Put him in cuffs, and then flatten that tin can. I want it gone before lunch." I looked at the bulldozer blade. It was huge, cold steel. It could crush my home in 10 seconds. It could crush me in 2. "I am not moving," I said quietly. "This is my home. If you want to tear it down, you have to go through me." Tiffany laughed. "Oh, Winston, always the martyr. You really want to die for a pile of rust." "Fine." She nodded to the officer. "Get him." The officer pulled his taser. "Sir, turn around and put your hands on your head." I tightened my grip on the bar. I wasn't going to attack him, but I wasn't going to surrender either. I was ready to take the voltage. I was ready to go down fighting. And then I heard it, a siren. But it wasn't a police siren. It was deeper, louder. It was coming from the access road. A black van sped into the rail yard. It fishtailed in the snow, correcting at the last second. It had the logo of a law firm on the side, Sterling and Associates. The van screeched to a halt right next to the police cruiser. The side door flew open. A hydraulic lift whirred to life, lowering a platform to the snowy ground. And there she was, Elena. She was sitting in a wheelchair, her left leg encased in a thick purple cast. She looked pale. She looked tired, but her eyes were burning with a fire that could melt steel. Flanking her were 2 men in expensive suits carrying briefcases. They looked like pit bulls in silk ties. "Stop!" Elena shouted. Her voice was amplified by a megaphone she held in her hand. "Stop this demolition immediately!" Tiffany spun around. "Who the hell are you?" "I am the attorney of record for Mr. Winston Graves," Elena announced, her voice echoing off the metal sides of the trains. "And I have an emergency injunction signed by Judge Patterson 10 minutes ago, halting all activity on this site." She wheeled herself forward through the slush. The 2 lawyers cleared a path for her. She rolled right up to the police officer and shoved a thick packet of papers into his chest. "Read it," she commanded. The officer looked confused. He took the papers. He looked at the seal. He looked at the signature. "This is a temporary restraining order against Apex Capital and Tiffany Graves," he read. Tiffany marched over, her face twisting into a mask of rage. "Let me see that. This is ridiculous. I own this land. I have the title." "You have a forgery," Elena said, calm and cold. "What?" Tiffany screeched. "How dare you? I am a licensed broker." Elena looked at her. "You are a fraud, Tiffany, and we are going to prove it. But right now, that is not why the bulldozer has to stop." Elena turned her wheelchair to face the bulldozer driver. "Turn off that engine," she ordered. The driver looked at Tiffany, then at the officer, then at the woman in the wheelchair. "He killed the engine." The silence that fell over the yard was sweet. Elena looked at me. She gave me a small nod. Then she turned back to the officer and Tiffany. "You are trying to evict Mr. Graves based on trespassing laws," Elena said. "But you failed to consider the Railroad Act of 1920. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "The Railroad Act. Are you kidding me? That is ancient history." "It is current law," Elena said, smiling. "Specifically Section 14, Paragraph B, regarding the housing of retired rail employees. The law states that any veteran employee of the railway who takes up residence in abandoned rolling stock on company land and maintains said stock for a period of more than 30 days without formal eviction establishes a right of tenancy known as adverse possession of the rails." She pointed at me. Mr. Graves is a retired welder for the railway. He has lived here for 32 days. He has maintained the structure. He has improved it. Under federal law, which supersedes your municipal demolition permit, he is not a squatter. He is a tenant. And you cannot evict a tenant without a 90-day notice and a federal hearing. Tiffany's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. That is insane, she sputtered. He broke in. He is a bum. He is a rail worker, Elena said, sharp as a tack. And this is rail land. Until you can prove in federal court that the Great Northern and Pacific Railroad fully dissolved its assets, which you cannot because the trust is still active, Mr. Graves has more right to be here than you do. The police officer looked at the paperwork again. He scratched his head. She is right, ma'am, he said to Tiffany. This is a federal injunction. It cites the specific statutes. If I let you bulldoze this, I could lose my badge. This is a civil matter now. Tiffany screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure frustration. She kicked the snow. You are stalling, she yelled at Elena. This is just a delay tactic. You know I will win. I have the deed. I will drag this out in court until you run out of money. And look at him. She pointed a shaking finger at me. He is broke. He has nothing. He cannot afford to fight me. Elena looked at me. Winston, she said, do you have the item? I nodded. I walked to the side of the boxcar. I reached up into the hollow of the roof beam where I had hidden it. My fingers brushed the cold steel until I felt the oilcloth. I pulled it out. I walked over to Elena and handed her the tube. Tiffany watched us, her eyes narrowing. What is that? Elena opened the tube. She pulled out the yellowed parchment papers. She handled them with reverence. This, Elena said, holding up the document, is the original deed to the Iron Horse Trust established by Thaddeus Kane in 1955. Tiffany laughed, nervous and shrill. So what? It is a piece of old paper. It is a bearer instrument, Elena said. Do you know what that means, Tiffany? Tiffany stopped laughing. It means, Elena continued, that whoever holds this document is the legal beneficiary of the trust. This trust owns this rail yard. It owns the land under your feet. It owns the rolling stock. And it owns a portfolio of railroad bonds that have been maturing for 70 years. Elena turned the document around so Tiffany could see the seal. Winston Graves found this. He holds it, which means, legally speaking, Winston Graves is not just the tenant. He is the landlord. The color drained from Tiffany's face. She looked at the document. She looked at the seal. She knew real estate. She knew what a bearer title meant. It was the nuclear option of property law. No, she whispered. That was lost. That was supposed to be lost. I took a step forward. It was found, I said, by a welder who knows how to look beneath the rust. Tiffany looked at the police officer. Arrest them, she said, but her voice was weak. They stole it. That belongs to the city, or to the bank. The officer shook his head. Ma'am, this is way above my pay grade, but right now the injunction stands. You need to leave. Take your machine, Tiffany, I said, pointing to the bulldozer, and take yourself off my property. Tiffany looked at me with pure, unadulterated hate. This isn't over, Winston, she hissed. I will bury you in legal fees. I will challenge the authenticity of that paper. I will ruin you. You already tried, I said. You took my house. You took my dignity. You left me in the cold. And look at me. I spread my arms. I am still standing. Tiffany turned around. She marched back to her car. She slammed the door so hard the snow fell off the roof. The bulldozer driver shrugged, put the machine in reverse, and backed up the hill. The police officer tipped his cap to me and got in his cruiser. They left. The silence returned to the yard. I looked at Elena. She was shivering in her wheelchair, her face pale from the pain in her leg, but she was smiling. You came back, I said. I told you I would, she said. Besides, you make the best tea in Chicago. I looked at the document in her hand. Is it true? I asked. Do I really own this place? Elena looked at the paper. Winston, she said. We have to verify the bonds. But if my estimate is correct, the interest on this trust, you don't just own the yard, you might own half the block. I looked at my boxcar. I looked at Mateo, who was peeking out the door with a wide grin. I don't need half the block, I said. I just need to make sure my son's wife never wins again. Elena handed me the tube. Then let's go to work, she said, because she is going to come back, and next time she won't bring a bulldozer. She will bring fire. I took the tube. It felt warm in my hand. Let her bring fire, I said. I am a welder. Fire is my best friend. We sat around the oil drum stove like a war council planning a siege. It was midnight on a Tuesday. The wind had died down, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence over the rail yard. The only light came from the kerosene heater casting long, dancing shadows against the steel walls of the boxcar. Elena was propped up on her makeshift bed, her leg elevated. Mateo was sitting cross-legged on the floor, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. And I sat on my toolbox holding the smoking gun that was going to blow Tiffany Graves out of the water. It wasn't a gun made of metal, it was a notebook. A simple, spiral-bound notebook with a floral cover, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $2. Mateo had found it. While Tiffany was busy threatening me with bulldozers and police officers, she had forgotten that rich people are the most wasteful people on earth. They think that once they throw something in the bin, it ceases to exist. They forget that for people like Mateo, the trash can is just another filing cabinet. Mateo had spent 6 hours watching the house on Oak Creek Drive. He lay in the snow behind the neighbor's hedge, freezing his fingers off, waiting for the garbage truck schedule. But he beat the truck. He grabbed 3 bags of trash from Tiffany's curb and dragged them through the woods to the bus stop. When he dumped the contents onto the floor of the boxcar, I admit I felt a pang of shame. I was a man who used to pay his taxes early. Now I was sifting through my daughter-in-law's coffee grounds and discarded mail, but Elena told me to keep digging. She said the devil is in the details, and usually the details are shredded. But Tiffany was arrogant. She didn't shred. She just crumbled. Mateo found the notebook at the bottom of a bag filled with wrapping paper. I opened it to the marked page. My breath caught in my throat. It was a page of signatures, dozens of them. Row after row of blue ink. Winston Graves, Winston Graves, Winston L. Graves. The first few were shaky, clumsy attempts, but as you went down the page they got smoother, they got confident. By the bottom of the page the signature was identical to mine. It had the same sharp loop on the W, the same trailing S at the end. She practiced. Elena whispered, her voice filled with a lawyer's cold satisfaction. This proves premeditation, Winston. She didn't just forge the deed in a moment of desperation. She sat down, she studied your hand, and she practiced until she could steal your name perfectly. I looked at the page. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I remembered the day she stood in my living room smiling, telling me the new house would have a suite for me. All that time she had this notebook tucked in her bag. She wasn't planning a move. She was planning a heist. This is it, Elena said, taking the notebook. This is the ironclad proof. Combined with the inconsistent notary stamp date I found earlier, this puts her in prison for fraud and forgery. We have her, Winston. I nodded. I should have felt happy. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was a deep, heavy sadness. Because Tiffany might have held the pen, but Andre held the door. He knew. He had to know. We need one more thing, Elena said, interrupting my thoughts. We need corroboration. The notebook proves she did it. But to nail the conspiracy, we need to know if Andre was an accomplice or a victim. We found out the answer 2 hours later. I was dozing by the heater when I heard a car engine. It wasn't the aggressive roar of Tiffany's Mercedes. It was the hesitant engine of Andre's SUV. I moved to the peephole. The car was parked at the top of the embankment. The headlights were off. Someone was walking down the slope, stumbling in the snow. It is him, I said to Mateo. Hide the notebook. Hide everything. Andre reached the boxcar. He didn't knock. He just stood there, breathing hard, his breath puffing white in the moonlight. Dad, he whispered. Dad, are you in there? I unlatched the door. I slid it open just enough to show my face. What do you want, Andre? I asked. He looked terrible. His eyes were swollen. His face was pale and unshaven. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He smelled of scotch. Can I come in? He asked. Please, Dad. It is freezing. I stepped back, not because I wanted to comfort him, but because I wanted the truth. He climbed in. He looked around the boxcar. He saw the insulation. He saw the stove. He saw Elena sleeping in the corner, though she was awake, watching him through slit eyes. He sat down on the crate near the door. He put his head in his hands. She is crazy, Dad, he sobbed. Tiffany, she is losing it. The injunction, it stopped everything. The investors are pulling out. She is screaming at everyone. She threw a vase at me tonight. I stood over him. I was not the soft father anymore. I was the welder. I was the man of iron. Why are you here, Andre? I asked. I came to warn you. he said, looking up, his eyes swimming with tears. She is going to do something bad, Dad. She is talking about burning it down. She is talking about hiring guys to come here at night. You have to leave. You have to run. I looked at him. He was trying to be the hero now. Too late. I am not running, I said. I own this land, Andre, or the trust does, and I hold the key. Andre shook his head frantically. It does not matter. She does not care about the law anymore. She is desperate. She lost the commission money on the stock market, Dad. She bet it all on shorting some tech stock and she lost. She needs this deal to go through or we lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. So she stole my house to pay for her gambling, I said. Andre flinched. It wasn't like that, he whined. We were going to pay you back. I reached into my pocket. I clicked the record button on the phone Elena had lent me. I slipped it back into my shirt pocket. Andre, I said, my voice low and gentle. The trap was set. Did you know she forged my signature? Andre froze. He looked at the floor. Dad, did you know? I repeated. He started to cry again, a weak, pathetic sound. I didn't want her to, he whispered. I told her it was wrong, but she said it was the only way. She said you were stubborn. She said you wouldn't understand high finance. She practiced it at the kitchen table, Dad. I watched her do it. I told her to stop, but she said if I didn't shut up, she would leave me. She said she would take the kids. I watched her do it. That was the sentence. That was the nail in the coffin. So you watched your wife steal your father's name and you did nothing, I said. I was scared. Andre wept. I am a coward, Dad. I know I am. I am sorry. Please. You have to forgive me. Just give her the land, Dad. Give her the papers. Let us sell it. I promise I will buy you a condo. A real one this time. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had raised. I realized then that the son I loved had died a long time ago. The thing sitting in my boxcar was just a byproduct of greed and fear. No, I said. Andre looked up, shocked. What? I said no. I am not giving her the land. And I am not forgiving you. Not tonight. I pulled the phone from my pocket. I stopped the recording. You just confessed, Andre, I said, holding up the phone. You just told me you witnessed a felony and did nothing. That makes you an accomplice. Andre stood up. His face went white. You recorded me. I am protecting myself, I said, since you refused to. He stared at me. For a moment, I thought he might attack me. I gripped my wrecking bar, but he didn't. He didn't have the spine for violence. He only had the spine for betrayal. You are ruining my life, he whispered. You ruined your own life, son, I said. I am just sweeping up the debris. Now get out. Andre turned and stumbled out of the boxcar. He didn't look back. He ran up the embankment, slipping and falling in the snow. I watched him go. I felt a heavy stone in my chest. It is a terrible thing to gather evidence against your own child, but sometimes love means stopping the rot before it spreads. Elena sat up. You got it, she asked. I nodded. I got it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then the silence was broken by a sound that echoed across the ravine. Screeching tires. I moved to the door. At the top of the embankment, Andre's SUV was blocked. Another car had pulled up behind it. It was the Mercedes, Tiffany. She had followed him. She must have tracked his phone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the screaming. Tiffany got out of her car. She was wearing her white coat, now stained with mud. She was screaming at Andre. She was hitting his chest with her fists. She opened the driver's door of the SUV and dragged him out. I watched through the peephole. It was like watching a play from the balcony. She was pointing at the boxcar, then pointing at him. She knew. She knew he had come to warn me. She knew he had come to beg. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She reached into the SUV and grabbed his keys from the ignition. She grabbed his wallet from the center console. She threw them into the snow. Then she got into her Mercedes. She backed up. Andre was banging on her window. He was screaming. She didn't stop. She drove away, leaving him standing there in the dark. Then she stopped. She rolled down the window. Her voice carried over the cold air, sharp and clear. Do not come home, Andre. I changed the locks an hour ago. You chose him. Now you can live with him, or freeze with him. I do not care. She gunned the engine and sped off. Andre stood alone on the ridge. He looked at his SUV, which he couldn't start. He looked at the boxcar where his father had just rejected him. He was trapped. He had kicked me out into the cold because I was a burden. And now, 3 months later, the wheel had turned. He was the one standing in the snow. He was the one with nowhere to go. He started to walk down the hill toward me again. I latched the door. I locked it. Winston Mateo whispered. "He is coming back." "I know," I said. "Are you going to let him in?" I looked at the stove. I looked at the notebook. I listened to the recording of him admitting he watched his wife rob me. "No," I said. "Not tonight." There was a knock on the door. Weak. Desperate. "Dad," Andre called out. "Dad," she took my keys. She took my cards. Dad let me in. I sat on my toolbox. I stared at the steel door. "Dad, please," he cried. "It is cold out here." "I know, son," I whispered to myself. "I know exactly how cold it is." I didn't open the door. He knocked for 10 minutes. Then the knocking stopped. I heard his footsteps crunching away, walking toward the main road, walking toward the shelter, walking into the life he had designed for me. I looked at Elena. She wasn't judging me. She understood. Sometimes you have to let people feel the storm before they can understand the shelter. Karma had arrived, and it was colder than 10 below zero. The City Hall hearing room smelled of lemon floor wax and old money. It was a smell I knew well from my days working maintenance contracts for the municipal buildings back in the 80s. It was the smell of bureaucracy. The room was packed. People love a fight, especially when it involves land and money. I sat in the front row next to Elena, who was in her wheelchair, her leg propped up. I was wearing a suit that Elena had bought for me from a thrift store. It was a little tight in the shoulders, and the wool was scratchy, but it was clean. My shoes were polished. My hands were scrubbed raw, but no amount of soap could take the grease stains out of my cuticles or the scars off my knuckles. I looked down at them. They were the hands of a worker. On the other side of the aisle sat Tiffany. She was dressed for war in a sharp navy power suit with pearls around her neck. She looked immaculate. Her hair was sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection. She sat with her lawyers, a team of 3 men in gray suits who whispered to her constantly. But I noticed something. Her foot was tapping, a rapid, nervous rhythm against the carpet. Tap, tap, tap. She was terrified. She knew that today wasn't just about a zoning permit. It was about her survival. The councilman banged his gavel. He was a tired-looking man with glasses perched on the end of his nose. "We are here to discuss the emergency injunction regarding the property known as the Yards and the Crystal Creek Development Project," he droned. "Ms. Graves, you may proceed." Tiffany stood up. She walked to the podium. She didn't look at me. She adjusted the microphone and put on her mask. The mask of the concerned community leader. "Council members," she began, her voice smooth as silk. "We are here today because a great opportunity for our city is being held hostage. The Crystal Creek project represents jobs. It represents revenue. It represents the future. We are ready to break ground. We have the funding. We have the vision." She paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with the zoning board members. "But we are being blocked," she continued, her voice dropping to a tone of pity, "by a squatter, an illegal occupant who has broken into a condemned structure and refuses to leave." She finally pointed at me. "Mr. Winston Graves claims to have rights to this land. But look at him. He is a homeless man. He has been living in filth for months. He is confused. He is unstable. We tried to help him. My husband and I offered him assistance, but he refused. Instead, he chose to live in a rusted boxcar surrounded by trash. She was good. I had to give her that. She was painting a picture of a benevolent family trying to deal with a senile old relative. "This is not about history," she said, her voice rising. "This is about public safety. That rail yard is a hazard. It is a breeding ground for rats and disease. And Mr. Graves, well, frankly, he is part of that blight. We need to clear the land. We need to remove the trash. All of it." The insult hung in the air. Trash. She had called me trash in front of the city council. The room murmured. People looked at me, some with pity, some with disgust. Tiffany smiled a small, triumphant smile and sat down. The councilman looked at us. "Mr. Graves or Miss Sterling, do you have a response?" Elena started to reach for her microphone, but I put a hand on her arm. "Let me," I whispered. Elena looked at me. She saw the fire in my eyes. She nodded and sat back. I stood up. My knees popped loud enough for the people behind me to hear. I walked to the podium. I didn't have notes. I didn't have a prepared speech. I just had the truth. I gripped the sides of the wooden podium. My large scarred hands looked out of place against the polished veneer. I looked at Tiffany. She was smirking. She thought she had won. She thought the old man would stutter and crumble. "My name is Winston Graves," I said, my voice deep and steady, filling the room without a microphone. "I am 73 years old, and the lady is right. I am homeless." The room went quiet. "I live in a boxcar," I continued. "I heat my home with a kerosene stove I fixed myself. I sleep on a mattress I pulled out of a dumpster. And yes, sometimes I smell like smoke and oil." I paused. I looked at the councilman. "But why am I homeless? Is it because I am lazy?" "No. I worked 40 years welding the tracks that bring the trains into the city. Every steel girder on the L Bridge over the river, I welded that in 1978. The foundation of this very building, I poured that concrete in 1982. I looked at my hands, holding them up for everyone to see. These hands built this city. They are rough. They are scarred. And right now they are trembling because I am angry." I turned to face Tiffany. She stopped tapping her foot. Her smile faltered. "You call me dirty," I said, walking a few steps toward her table. "You say I am blight. You say I am trash to be removed." I took a breath. "I may have grease under my fingernails, Tiffany. I may have soot on my face. But that dirt washes off. Soap and water will fix me." I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that carried to the back of the room. "But you are sitting there in a $2,000 suit. Your hair is perfect. Your skin is clean. You look like a diamond. But inside," I pointed to her chest, "inside, you are rotten. You stole the house I paid for with 40 years of sweat. You kicked an old man out into a blizzard to die because you wanted a commission check. You forged my signature. You betrayed your family." I stood straight, tall, and proud. "My hands are clean, Tiffany. My conscience is clear. I can sleep at night in a freezing boxcar because I know who I am. But you sleep in a mansion, and you are rotting from the inside out because your soul is dirty, and no amount of money can wash that away." The room was deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Tiffany's face had turned a deep, ugly red. She opened her mouth to speak, to object, but nothing came out. She was paralyzed by the truth. I walked back to my seat and sat down. Elena squeezed my hand. Then she wheeled herself to the podium. She didn't need to shout. She just needed to cut. "Thank you, Mr. Graves," she said. She opened her briefcase. She pulled out a stack of documents. "Miss Graves claims she has the funding for the Crystal Creek project," Elena said, her voice clinical and sharp. "She claims she has investors. She claims she is a pillar of the business community." Elena held up a spreadsheet. "But we did a little digging into the finances of Apex Capital, and specifically into Ms. Graves's personal accounts." Tiffany stood up, knocking her chair over. "Object," she screamed. "This is a zoning hearing. My finances are private. They are relevant to your ability to complete the project the councilman ruled. Sit down, Ms. Graves." Elena smiled. It was a shark's smile. "We found that 3 months ago, Ms. Graves received a wire transfer of $300,000. The proceeds from the sale of Winston Graves' home. Money that was promised to be used for a new family residence." Elena flipped a page. "Instead, that money was transferred immediately into a day trading account, where it was used to short sell stock in a tech company called Vortex." The crowd gasped. "Vortex stock rallied," Elena said. "Ms. Graves lost the entire amount in 48 hours. She held up another document, but she didn't stop there. Desperate to cover her losses, she began moving money from her real estate escrow accounts. These are deposits from other clients, people waiting to close on their homes. She looked at Tiffany, who was now gripping the table, her knuckles white. "You embezzled $400,000 of client money, Tiffany. You are not just broke. You are running a Ponzi scheme. You need this demolition to happen because you promised the land to investors who gave you cash that you have already spent." Elena turned to the council. "There is no Crystal Creek project. There is no development. There is just a desperate woman trying to pave over her crimes before anyone notices the money is gone." The room erupted. The 3 lawyers sitting next to Tiffany stood up. They looked at the documents Elena was holding. They looked at Tiffany. "Is this true?" one of the lawyers asked. Tiffany stammered. It was a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back." The lawyers closed their briefcases. "We are withdrawing as counsel," the lead lawyer said to the councilman. "We cannot represent a client who has committed fraud against her own escrow." They walked out, leaving Tiffany alone at the table. The councilman banged his gavel, furious. Order, he shouted. Order. He looked at Tiffany. Ms. Graves, these are serious allegations. If you have misappropriated escrow funds, that is a felony. It is a lie. Tiffany screamed, her voice shrill and breaking. They are lying. The old man is lying. It is my land. I have the deed. Elena pulled out the metal tube, the one I had retrieved from the boxcar. Actually, Elena said. About that deed. She opened the tube. She pulled out the Thaddeus Kane Trust document. This is the original bearer deed for the rail yard, Elena announced. Dated 1955. It has been missing for decades. Winston Graves found it, and as the holder of this document, he is the legal administrator of the Iron Horse Trust. She placed the yellowed parchment on the councilman's desk. The land belongs to the trust, and the trust does not wish to sell. The councilman looked at the document. He looked at the seal. He looked at me. Motion to deny the demolition permit, he said. Granted. He looked at Tiffany. And Ms. Graves, I suggest you do not leave the building. I see the chief of police entering the back of the room, and I believe he wants a word with you about your bank records. I turned around. 2 officers were walking down the aisle. Tiffany looked at them. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide with panic. The arrogance was gone. The mask had shattered. She grabbed her purse. She didn't wait. She bolted. She ran toward the side exit, her high heels clacking on the floor. Stop her! Someone shouted. She burst through the fire exit door, setting off the alarm. Whoop! Whoop! The room went into chaos. I sat there calm in the middle of the storm. Elena looked at me and grinned. She is running, Elena said. Let her run, I said. You cannot run from your own shadow. I looked at my hands again. The hands she had called dirty. They were steady. They were strong. We won, I whispered. Not yet, Elena said, closing her briefcase. She is cornered, and a cornered rat is dangerous. She knows she is going to prison. She has one move left. What move, I asked. Destruction, Elena said. If she can't have the land, she will make sure you can't have it either. I stood up. My boxcar, I said, realizing what she meant. Elena nodded. We need to get back to the yard, Winston. Now. We hurried out of the chamber, leaving the chaos of City Hall behind. But as we stepped out into the cold afternoon air, I saw a plume of black smoke rising in the distance. It was coming from the direction of the industrial park. My heart stopped. She didn't just run away. She went back to finish the job. I ran for Elena's van. Drive, I shouted to her driver. Drive fast. The war wasn't over. The final battle was just beginning, and it was going to be fought with fire. The smell of gasoline is a coward's perfume. It is the scent of someone who wants to destroy something without looking it in the eye. I woke up at 2 a.m, choking on it. It was seeping through the cracks in the floorboards, overriding the smell of our wood stove and the crisp scent of the snow. It was heavy and sharp, and it screamed danger. Mateo, wake up. I shook the boy. He groaned, rolling over under his pile of blankets. He was dreaming of a warm bed in a house that didn't rattle in the wind. I hated to wake him. I hated to pull him back into this war. But the war had come to our doorstep. I heard footsteps outside, not the heavy crunch of boots on snow, but the soft scuffing of sneakers. Fast, nervous. Then came the sound of glass breaking against steel. Smash! Whoosh! A ball of orange light exploded against the side of the boxcar. I saw the flash through the peephole. A Molotov cocktail. The flames licked up the side of the metal, heating the steel instantly. They weren't trying to scare us. They were trying to cook us. Get up, Mateo, I roared, kicking the blankets off him. Fire! We have fire! Mateo scrambled up, his eyes wide with terror. He smelled the smoke immediately. Are we burning? He screamed. Not yet, I said, grabbing my welding gloves. The walls are steel. Steel does not burn, but the heat will suffocate us if we stay inside. And if the fire reaches the wooden floor or the tires underneath, it is over. I looked through the peephole again. There were 3 of them. They were dressed in black, wearing ski masks. They were holding gas cans and baseball bats. They were pouring fuel on the railroad ties underneath our home. They wanted to create an oven. I knew who sent them. Tiffany. She was cornered. She was facing prison. She needed the bonds destroyed. She needed the evidence gone, and she needed the old man who humiliated her to disappear. She didn't have the guts to do it herself, so she hired these street rats. They made a mistake. They brought fire to a welder. I went to the secret compartment. I pulled out the tanks. Oxygen, acetylene. They were heavy, but adrenaline made them feel light. I hooked up the hoses. I grabbed the torch handle. It was the vintage brass one, Thaddeus Kane's personal tool. I put on my dark welding goggles. "Mateo," I said, "grab the fire extinguisher. The big one we stole from the construction site. When I open this door, you spray the base of the fire. Do not stop until the white cloud covers everything." "What are you going to do?" Mateo asked, his voice trembling. "I am going to introduce them to the dragon," I said. I cracked the valves on the tanks. Hiss. I grabbed my striker. Ready. I unlatched the steel door. 1, 2, 3. I threw the door open. The heat hit us first. The flames were climbing up the side of the car, licking at the open doorway. The smoke was thick and black. "Go, Mateo." The boy jumped out onto the railroad tie step. He pulled the pin on the extinguisher. Whoosh! A massive cloud of white chemical powder blasted into the flames. It choked the fire instantly, smothering the gasoline on the ground. The orange glow died down to a sizzling hiss. The sudden darkness confused the attackers. They had expected screaming victims, not a counterattack. "Hey," one of them shouted. He was big, holding a metal bat. "Get them! Smash their heads!" He charged at the ramp. I stepped into the doorway. I looked like a demon in my dark goggles and soot-stained coat. I squeezed the striker. Spark. Whoa! The torch ignited. I had the oxygen mix set high. It wasn't a lazy yellow flame. It was a spear of blue light 3 feet long, screaming with the sound of a jet engine. 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It was hot enough to cut through an I-beam in seconds. The big thug stopped dead in his tracks. He raised his bat. I swung the torch. I didn't aim for his skin. I slashed the air in front of him. The heat wave hit him like a physical wall. He stumbled back, shielding his face. "Back up," I roared, my voice amplified by the rage in my chest. "Back up, or I will melt the zipper off your jacket." "You are dead, old man," the thug screamed, but he didn't step forward. He circled, looking for an opening. The other 2 thugs moved to the sides. They were trying to flank us. One of them pulled out a lighter. He was holding a rag stuffed into a bottle of vodka. Another firebomb. "Mateo, watch the left," I shouted. I jumped down from the boxcar. My knees screamed in protest, but I ignored the pain. I landed in the snow, the torch hissing in my hand like a living thing. I advanced on the leader. He swung the bat at my head. I ducked. The bat hit the side of the boxcar with a deafening clang. Before he could recover, I thrust the torch forward. I touched the flame to the end of his aluminum bat. In less than a second, the metal glowed, cherry red, then white. The structural integrity failed. The end of the bat drooped like wet clay. The thug dropped it, screaming. He looked at his weapon, which was now a melted stick. He looked at me. "I am a welder's son," I growled, stepping closer, the blue flame casting long, terrifying shadows on the snow. "I work with fire. You just play with it." The second thug, the one with the bottle, tried to throw it. I spun around. "Do not do it," I warned. He threw it, but his aim was bad. He was scared. The bottle hit a snowbank and shattered harmlessly. The fuel spilled into the snow but didn't catch. I turned the torch toward him. "Get out of my yard," I shouted. We were winning. We had the momentum. But then I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. A click. I looked to the right. The third thug. The quiet one. He wasn't holding a bat. He wasn't holding a gas can. He was holding a gun. It was a small, cheap pistol, but at this range, it was a cannon. "Drop the torch," he said, his voice shaky. "Drop it, or I put a hole in you, Grandpa." I froze. I held the torch steady, but I knew I couldn't reach him. He was 10 feet away. Mateo was behind me, holding the empty fire extinguisher. "Mateo, run," I whispered. "No," Mateo said. The gunman leveled the pistol at my chest. "End of the line," he said. Tiffany said no witnesses. I closed my eyes. I thought about Lucille. I thought about the house I built. I thought about the legacy I was leaving. I wasn't afraid to die. I was just angry that it ended like this in the dirt at the hands of a child with a gun. I tightened my grip on the torch. If he shot me, I would throw it. Maybe the tank would explode. Maybe I could take him with me. "Goodbye, son," I thought, thinking of Andre. "I hope you find your soul." The gunman tightened his finger on the trigger. We. The sound shattered the night. Sirens, loud, close, and screaming. Blue and red lights flooded the rail yard, blinding us all. Floodlights from the top of the embankment snapped on, turning the night into day. "Police, drop the weapon. Drop it now." The voice came from a loudspeaker. It was authoritative. It was the cavalry. The gunman flinched. He looked up at the ridge. 3 squad cars were there, doors open, officers crouching behind them with rifles trained on the ravine. The gunman looked at me, then at the police. He panicked. He turned to run. "Do not move," the police shouted. He took 2 steps in the deep snow and tripped. The other 2 thugs threw their hands in the air instantly. They knew when the game was up. I turned off the torch. The roar of the flame died, leaving a ringing silence in my ears. I pulled off my goggles. Officers swarmed down the hill, sliding in the snow, tackling the gunmen, cuffing the others. I saw a figure moving down the hill with them. She was using crutches, moving awkwardly but fast. Elena. She reached the bottom of the ravine, breathless. She looked at the smoke rising from the side of the boxcar. She looked at the melted bat on the ground. She looked at me. "Are you okay?" she cried. "Winston, are you hurt?" "I am fine," I said, leaning against the cold steel of the train. "Just a little hot work." "I called them," Elena said, pointing to the police. As soon as we left the hearing, I knew she would try this. I had a patrol car sitting at the entrance of the park. When they saw the van pull in, they called for backup. I looked at the thugs being dragged away. "Did she send them?" I asked. One of the officers walked over. He was holding the gunman's phone, which had fallen in the snow. "Mr. Graves," he said, "we just unlocked this phone. The last text message received 10 minutes ago reads, 'Burn it all. Payment is double if you bring me the ashes.'" He looked at me grimly. "The number is registered to a burner phone, but the GPS ping places the sender about 2 miles away, sitting in a Mercedes-Benz in the Walmart parking lot." I looked at Elena. She smiled. "That is conspiracy to commit arson and attempted murder," she said. "That is a life sentence." The officer nodded. "We have units moving on her location now." I looked at Mateo. He was sitting on the step of the boxcar, shaking. I walked over and put my arm around him. "We did it, son," I said. "We held the line." Mateo looked up at me. His face was streaked with soot and sweat. "You were like a dragon, Winston," he whispered. "You were scary." I chuckled. It was a wheezing, tired sound. "Sometimes you have to be the dragon to protect the castle," I said. The fire department arrived to hose down the side of the boxcar just to be safe. The water froze as soon as it hit the ground, creating a sheet of ice around our home. But I didn't care about the ice. I watched the police cars drive away, their lights fading into the distance, carrying the men who tried to kill us. I looked at the blackened scorch mark on the side of my home. It was ugly, but it was a battle scar, and scars are just proof that you survived. Elena stayed with us until dawn. We sat inside drinking coffee, the smell of gasoline still faint in the air. "She is done, Winston," Elena said softly. "Tiffany is done. After tonight, there is no bail. There is no deal. She is going away for a long time. And the land I asked. The land is safe," she said. "And the bonds. Winston, I made some calls. The Iron Horse Trust. It has been accumulating compound interest since 1955. She hesitated, looking at me with a strange expression. "How much?" I asked. "Enough to buy a lot of welding torches," she said. I looked at my hands. The hands that had held the weapon. The hands that had built the home. "I do not want torches," I said. "I want justice." And as the sun rose over the rail yard, illuminating the smoke and the snow, I knew that justice was finally coming. And it was going to wear handcuffs. Justice is a slow train, but when it arrives, it hits with the weight of 1,000 tons. It was 6 in the morning when we pulled up to the house on Oak Creek Drive. The sun was just starting to bleed over the horizon, painting the snow in shades of pink and gray. It was the same driveway where Tiffany had thrown my suitcases into the slush 3 months ago. It was the same porch where Andre had watched me beg for shelter and turned his back. But this time, I was not standing in the cold with my hat in my hand. I was sitting in the back of an unmarked police cruiser next to Elena. My hands were warm, my heart was steady, and I was about to watch the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. The raid was silent. There were no sirens wailing to warn the neighbors. There were just 6 tactical officers moving with the precision of a wolf pack. They wore heavy armor and carried battering rams. They moved up the driveway past the Mercedes that Tiffany had bought with my stolen equity. They moved past Andre's SUV, which sat cold and dead in the driveway. Elena rolled down the window. The cold air hit my face, but it didn't bite like it used to. I was insulated by the truth. "Watch closely, Winston," she whispered. "You paid a high price for this ticket. You might as well enjoy the show." The lead officer signaled. 1, 2, 3. Boom! The battering ram hit the oak front door. The sound cracked through the quiet suburban morning like a thunderclap. The door, the heavy, expensive door that had been locked against me, splintered off its hinges. "Police search warrant," the officers screamed, swarming into the foyer. "Get on the ground." Police. I leaned forward. I couldn't see inside, but I could hear the chaos. I heard Tiffany screaming. It was a high-pitched shriek of indignation, not fear. She sounded like a queen whose tea had been spilled, not a criminal facing a life sentence. "Get your hands off me," she yelled. "Do you know who I am? I will sue you. I will sue this entire department." Then I heard Andre. "Dad. Dad, is that you? What is happening?" He sounded pathetic. He sounded like a child waking up from a nightmare only to find the nightmare was real. Minutes passed. Lights flickered on in the neighbors' houses. Curtains twitched. The people of Oak Creek Drive were waking up to see that the rot had been living right next door. Then the front door opened again. 2 officers marched Tiffany out. She was not wearing her power suit today. She was wearing silk pajamas and a robe that was hanging off one shoulder. Her hair was a mess. Her makeup was smeared. But the most important accessory she was wearing was a pair of steel handcuffs. Their silver finish glinted in the morning light. She was fighting them. She was kicking and spitting. "You have no proof," she screamed. "My lawyers will have your badges." The detective in charge walked behind her carrying a plastic evidence bag. Inside it, I could see the notebook. The spiral-bound notebook Mateo had pulled from the trash. The notebook where she had practiced forging my signature 1,000 times. "Tiffany Graves." The detective announced, his voice calm and bored. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Winston Graves, for conspiracy to commit arson, for wire fraud, for grand larceny, and for the embezzlement of client escrow funds." Tiffany saw me. I was watching through the window of the cruiser. Our eyes met. For a second, she stopped fighting. She looked at the old man she had called trash. She looked at the welder she had tried to burn. And she saw that I was still standing. "You," she hissed, "you ruined everything, you old fool. You should have just died." I rolled down the window further. "I tried, Tiffany," I said, my voice carrying across the lawn. "But the fire you sent, it wasn't hot enough." The officer shoved her into the back of a squad car. She slammed against the seat, still screaming obscenities, until the door slammed shut, silencing her hate. But the show wasn't over. Andre came out next. He wasn't in handcuffs. Not yet. He walked out onto the porch looking dazed. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, shivering in the cold. He looked at the police cars. He looked at his wife in the back of one. He looked at me. "Officer," he stammered to the detective, "I didn't do it. I swear. I didn't know about the fire. She took my keys. She locked me out." "We know," the detective said, checking a clipboard. "We have the recording your father provided. You are an accessory, Mr. Graves, but right now you are not under arrest. However, you have a bigger problem." "What problem?" Andre asked, looking around wildly. A black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in a cheap suit got out carrying a briefcase and a stack of papers. He looked like an undertaker. "Mr. Andre Graves?" the man asked, walking up the steps. "Yes," Andre said. "I am representing the First National Bank," the man said, handing Andre a paper. "This is a notice of immediate foreclosure and eviction." "Foreclosure?" Andre laughed nervously. "That is a mistake. We pay the mortgage. Tiffany handles the bills." The man shook his head. "Your wife took out 3 home equity lines of credit on this property in the last 6 months, the man explained. "She forged your signature on 2 of them. The house is leveraged for 300% of its value, and she hasn't made a payment in 4 months. Andre stopped breathing. He stared at the paper. "But the money," he whispered. "The money from my dad's house. The commission checks." "Gone," the man said. "All gone. The bank owns this property now, effective immediately. The locks are being changed as we speak. You have 10 minutes to collect essential personal items and vacate the premises." "Vacate," Andre whispered. "But where do I go?" "That is not the bank's concern," the man said, turning away. Andre stood there frozen. The weight of it crashed down on him. The house he had kicked me out of wasn't his. The life he had built was a hologram. He had nothing. He ran back inside. I watched through the open door as he frantically grabbed a coat. He grabbed a bag. He tried to grab the TV, but the sheriff deputy stopped him. Only personal items, the deputy said. The electronics are assets of the bank. Andre came back out 5 minutes later. He was holding a duffel bag. He was wearing his expensive parka, the one with the fur hood. He stood on the driveway. The police cars were leaving, taking Tiffany to jail. The bank representative was putting a padlock on the front door. Andre looked at his SUV. He reached for the handle. Locked. The detective tossed him the keys. It is being impounded as evidence in the fraud investigation, the detective said, taking the keys back. Sorry. Andre stood in the snow. He looked at the empty driveway. He looked at the locked house. He looked at the street. Then he saw me. I stepped out of the cruiser. I leaned on my cane, not because I needed it, but because I liked the way it felt solid in my hand. I walked up the driveway. I stopped 10 feet from him. Dad, Andre said. His voice was small, broken. Dad, did you see what they did? They took everything. I listened. I didn't speak. Dad, I have nowhere to go. Andre cried, tears freezing on his cheeks. They took the house. They took the car. Tiffany. She lied to me, Dad. She stole everything. I nodded slowly. I know, son, I said. She stole from the best. Dad, Andre took a step toward me, reaching out a hand. Can I come with you? To the boxcar. I know it is small, but I can help. I can chop wood. I can cook. Please, Dad. Do not leave me here. It is freezing. I looked at him. I looked at the son who had watched me sleep in a motel for a month. The son who had driven past me in a ditch while his mistress laughed. The son who had chosen a warm lie over a cold truth. I thought about mercy. I thought about forgiveness. But then I looked at my hands. The hands that had dragged a woman out of a burning car. The hands that had fought thugs with a welding torch. These hands were tired of carrying dead weight. The boxcar is full, Andre, I said, my voice flat. Dad, please. He begged, falling to his knees in the snow, exactly the way he had begged me to sell the house months ago. I am your son. You cannot leave me on the street. I looked down at him. You are right, I said. I am your father. And a father's job is to teach his son how to survive. I taught you how to weld. I taught you how to work. You chose to forget those lessons. You chose the easy way. I pointed to the street. Now you have to learn the hard way. But I will die out here, Andre wailed. I didn't die, I said. And I am 73 years old with a bad hip. You are young. You have a coat. You have a bag. Start walking. Where Andre sobbed. To the shelter, I said. The one Tiffany told me to go to. It is 3 miles that way. If you hurry, you might make it before lunch. I turned around. I walked back to the cruiser where Elena was waiting. Dad, Andre screamed behind me. Dad, come back. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I got into the car. Let us go, Elena, I said. As we drove away, I looked in the side mirror. I saw a small figure standing in the vast, empty driveway of a mansion that didn't belong to him. He was alone. He was cold. And for the first time in his life, he was completely and utterly free to make his own choices. He had wanted to be a man of leisure. Now he was just a man. I sat back in the seat. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of regret. It was a tear of release. I had cut the anchor chain. The ship was finally moving, and as the sun rose higher, melting the snow on the hood of the car, I realized that the coldest winter of my life was finally over. The spring was coming, and I had a lot of work to do. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Chase Tower was silent enough to hear a pin drop. It was a different kind of silence than the boxcar. The boxcar silence was heavy and cold. This silence was expensive. It smelled of lemon polish and conditioned air. I sat at a mahogany table that was longer than my entire train car. I was wearing a new suit Elena had insisted on buying for me. It was gray wool and it fit better than the thrift store one, but I still felt like an imposter. I kept checking my hands to make sure the grease was scrubbed out from under my fingernails. Next to me, Elena sat in her wheelchair, her cast propped up on a spare chair. She looked like a shark in a blazer. She was reviewing a stack of documents with a red pen. On my other side sat Matteo. The boy looked terrified. He was wearing a collared shirt for the first time in his life, and he kept touching the silk tie like he was afraid it would bite him. Across from us sat Mr. Henderson. He was the senior archivist for the bank. He was a small man with glasses so thick they magnified his eyes until he looked like an owl. He was wearing white cotton gloves. In the center of the table lay the metal tube. Mr. Henderson reached out and touched the tube gently. "You say you found this welded into the wall structure of a 1955 Pullman boxcar?" he asked, his voice trembling with excitement. "Yes, sir," I said. "It was hidden behind a false panel, under the signature of Thaddeus Kane." "Thaddeus Kane," Mr. Henderson whispered. "The ghost of the rails. He was a legend, Mr. Graves. He didn't trust the banking system after the crash of '29. He converted his assets into bearer bonds and hid them. Historians have been looking for the Iron Horse Trust for 50 years. He opened the tube. He slid out the roll of parchment. It crinkled softly, a sound like dry autumn leaves. He spread the documents out on the table. He used small weights to hold down the corners. I leaned forward. I had seen them before in the dim light of the lantern, but here, under the fluorescent lights, they looked different. They looked like art. The paper was thick and cream-colored, woven with linen. The ink was a deep emerald green. In the center of each page was an intricate engraving of a steam locomotive charging through a mountain pass. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses. He pulled out a magnifying glass. "Remarkable," he breathed. "Absolutely remarkable. These are Series A bearer bonds issued by the Great Northern and Pacific Railroad, dated October 14th, 1955. He looked up at me. "Do you know what a bearer bond is, Mr. Graves?" Elena answered for me. "It means that whoever holds the paper owns the debt," she said. "No name is registered. Possession is 100% of the law." "Exactly," Mr. Henderson said. "These are cash equivalents. And look at the face value." He pointed to the number in the corner of the top bond. $5,000, I read. "There are 20 of them," Mr. Henderson said, counting. "That is a principal value of $100,000. In 1955, that was a fortune. I did the math in my head. 100,000. It was a lot of money. It could buy a nice house. It could fix my hip. But wait," Mr. Henderson said, raising a gloved finger. "That is just the face value. These are coupon bonds, Mr. Graves. They carry a fixed interest rate of 5% compounded annually, and they have not been cashed in 70 years. He pulled a calculator from his pocket. His fingers flew across the keys. 70 years of compound interest, he muttered. The railroad was absorbed by the Federal Transport Authority in the 80s, which guaranteed the debt. So the government owes this money. He hit the equals button. He stared at the screen. He blinked. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Graves, do you have a heart condition?" "No, sir," I said. "Just a bad hip." "Good," Mr. Henderson said. "Because according to the current valuation, taking into account the accumulated interest and the inflation adjustments, the total redemption value of these instruments is $2,140,000. The room spun. $2 million. I looked at Matteo. His mouth was hanging open. $2 million, the boy whispered. "Winston, that is like movie star money." I looked at Elena. She wasn't surprised. She had done the math before we came. She just squeezed my hand under the table. "We would like to initiate the redemption process," Elena said smoothly. "And we would like to open a high-yield trust account in Mr. Graves' name immediately." Mr. Henderson nodded vigorously. "Of course, absolutely. I will get the paperwork. It will take a few days for the Treasury to clear the funds, but we can advance you a line of credit against the assets today. Say, $50,000 for walking around money." $50,000, just for walking around. I sat back in the leather chair. I looked at the green paper on the table. $2 million. It was enough to buy 10 houses on Dorchester Avenue. It was enough to buy Tiffany's Mercedes 50 times over. It was enough to bury Andre in a mountain of cash. And the irony was so heavy it almost crushed me. Tiffany had destroyed her life trying to steal a commission check of a few $100,000. Andre had betrayed me for a debt of $200,000. They had kicked me out of their house to save pennies. And all the while I was sleeping on top of a fortune. If they had just been kind. If they had just let me stay in the basement. If they had treated me like a father instead of a nuisance, I would have shared it with them. We would have found it together. Greed had blinded them, and kindness had guided me to the gold. "Mr. Graves," Mr. Henderson asked, holding out a pen. "Are you ready to sign?" I took the pen. It was a heavy silver fountain pen. I signed my name. Winston Graves, the same signature Tiffany had tried to forge. But this one was real. We walked out of the bank an hour later. I had a cashier's check for $50,000 in my pocket and a black debit card that was linked to an account that would soon hold millions. We stood on the sidewalk in the busy downtown street. People rushed past us, businessmen in suits, tourists looking at maps. They didn't look at me. To them, I was just another old man in a gray suit. They didn't know I was the king of the rail yard. "What do you want to do?" Winston Elena asked. "You can go anywhere. The Ritz-Carlton, the Four Seasons. You can buy a condo right now." I looked at the city. I looked at the steel towers rising into the clouds. I had helped build some of them. I looked at Matteo. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Can we get pizza?" he asked. "Real pizza, with extra cheese." I laughed. "Yes, son," I said. "We can get pizza." We went to a deep dish place on Michigan Avenue. We ordered the biggest pie they had. We drank soda from glass bottles. We laughed until our sides hurt. When the check came, I pulled out the black card. The waiter looked at it, then looked at me. He ran it. It cleared. After lunch, we went to a hardware store. Not a boutique, a real hardware store. The kind that smells of sawdust and oil. Elena watched me from her wheelchair as I walked down the aisles. "Winston," she said, "you are a millionaire. You can hire people to fix things now." I picked up a new DeWalt impact driver. I felt the weight of it, I know I said. "But I don't want to hire people. I want to build." I bought the best tools money could buy. I bought a generator that could power a hospital. I bought a new welding rig. I bought high-grade steel plating. I bought insulated windows. Matteo pushed the cart. It was overflowing. "Where are we taking this, Winston?" he asked. "To a new house." I looked at him. "No," I said. "We are taking it home. To the yard." Matteo looked confused. "Back to the boxcar." "But you are rich. Why would you live in a boxcar?" "Because it is mine," I said, "and because I have a plan." We drove back to the rail yard in a rental truck. I parked at the top of the embankment. The sun was setting over the industrial park, turning the snow purple and gold. My boxcar sat there in the ravine. It was scarred by fire. It was ugly. It was rusted. But it was standing. I hired a crew the next day, not to demolish it, but to lift it. We used a massive crane to lift the boxcar off the tracks. We poured a concrete foundation, a real foundation deep and strong. We set the car down on top of it. Over the next few weeks, I spent money, but I didn't spend it on Ferraris or vacations. I added 2 more boxcars. I welded them together, creating a U-shape. I cut out the walls and installed floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the ravine. I insulated it with the best foam money could buy. I installed radiant floor heating. I built a kitchen with stainless steel appliances, but I kept the exterior. I kept the orange paint. I kept the Thaddeus Kane signature welded on the wall. It became a mansion made of scrap. One evening, a month after the money came through, I was sitting on my new leather couch looking out the big window at the snow falling. The boxcar was 70 degrees inside. The floor was warm under my feet. Matteo was in the kitchen doing his homework. I had hired a tutor for him. He was going to get his GED, then he was going to engineering school. I was paying for it all. Elena was there too. She stopped by every Tuesday for dinner. Her leg was out of the cast and she was walking with a cane. "Winston," she said, sipping a glass of wine, "you know you are the talk of the city, the millionaire hobo they call you." "Let them talk," I said. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up. "Hello? Dad?" The voice was weak, shivering. It was Andre. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the silence on the line. "Dad," Andre said, "I saw the news. About the bonds. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said. I am staying at the shelter downtown," Andre said. "It is crowded. The food is bad. Someone stole my shoes last night, Dad. I am walking in socks." I took a sip of my coffee. "That sounds hard," I said. "Dad," Andre whispered, $2 million. You could help me. Help. You could send me a few thousand, just to get an apartment, just to get started. I learned my lesson, Dad, I really did. I looked at Matteo studying his math book. I looked at the warm, safe home I had built with my own hands. I learned a lesson too, son, I said. What lesson? Andre asked, hopeful. I learned that you cannot buy a man's character, I said, and you cannot buy your way out of the consequences. Dad, please. I have a job opening. Andre, I said. Really? Andre gasped. What is it? I will take it. Anything. Manager? Supervisor? No, I said. I am building a fence around the yard. I need someone to dig post holes. It pays $15 an hour. Bring your own gloves. There was a long silence. Digging holes? Andre asked, his voice filled with disgust. Dad, I am a college graduate. I cannot dig holes. Then you are not hungry enough, I said. I hung up. I looked at the phone. I blocked the number. I wasn't being cruel. I was being a father. He needed to dig. He needed to sweat. He needed to understand that the only money that matters is the money you bleed for. I turned back to the window. The snow was beautiful tonight. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was just scenery. I had the treasure. But the treasure wasn't the bonds. The treasure wasn't the bank account. The treasure was the peace of mind knowing that I could survive anything. The treasure was the boy in the kitchen who called me Winston with respect, not because he wanted something, but because I had fed him. I was Winston Graves, the welder, the millionaire, and for the first time in a long time I was exactly where I belonged. The calendar on the wall said December, but the wind on my face said it was time to remember. It has been exactly 1 year since the night I dragged my suitcase through the snow to finding a rusted metal tomb that became my salvation. 1 year since the world tried to freeze me to death and failed. I walked down Michigan Avenue. The holiday lights were up, wrapped around the trees like strings of diamonds. Shoppers were rushing past carrying bags filled with gifts, their breath puffing out in white clouds. I was walking slower. I had nowhere to rush to. I was wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than my old car. It was warm. It was soft. It was the kind of coat a successful man wears. But on my head I was wearing my old welding cap. It was faded, grease-stained and frayed at the edges. Elena told me I should buy a hat that matched the coat. She said I looked like an eccentric millionaire. I told her that was exactly what I was. I told her the coat kept me warm, but the cap kept me humble. The cap reminded me that underneath the silk lining, I was still Winston Graves. I was still the man who knew how to melt steel. Walking next to me was Mateo. He looked different. The scared, hungry boy who had huddled next to my oil drum stove was gone. In his place was a young man. He was wearing a sturdy winter jacket and good boots. He held a clipboard in his hand. He was my assistant, my project manager, and in every way that mattered, he was my son. We were inspecting a new property downtown, a dilapidated warehouse I was planning to turn into a vocational school. Winston, Mateo said, checking his watch. We are late for the meeting with the architects. They get nervous when you are not there to tell them their blueprints are wrong. Let them wait, I said, enjoying the crisp air. Architects need to learn patience. You cannot rush a foundation, Mateo. We turned the corner onto Walker Drive. The wind hit us coming off the river. It was a sharp, biting wind. The kind of wind that seeks out the gaps in your clothes. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting on a piece of cardboard nestled into the alcove of an office building near a steam grate. He was wrapped in a blanket that was so dirty it looked like part of the pavement. He had a paper cup in front of him. He was shaking. It wasn't just the shivering of the cold. It was the deep, bone-rattling tremor of a man whose soul has been hollowed out. He had a beard now matted and gray. His face was gaunt, his cheekbones protruding like blades. He looked 20 years older than the man who had driven a black SUV. I stopped. Mateo stopped beside me. He followed my gaze. He stiffened. Winston, he whispered. Is that? Yes, I said quietly. That is him. I walked over. The snow crunched under my boots. The sound was loud in the quiet street. The beggar looked up. His eyes were watery and red-rimmed. He didn't recognize me at first. He just saw two men in warm coats. He saw potential marks. Spare some change, sir, he croaked, holding up the cup. Anything helps. God bless you. I looked down at him. Hello, Andre, I said. The cup shook. He froze. He squinted, peering through the gloom and the grime. He looked at my face. Then he looked up at the welding cap. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. He gasped and scrambled back, pressing himself against the brick wall. He looked ashamed. He looked terrified. Dad, he whispered. I stood there. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised, the son I had sacrificed everything for, the son who had thrown me away. Dad, Andre said, his voice cracking. Oh God, look at me. I am dying here, Dad. It is so cold. I know, I said. I remember. Dad, please. Andre started to cry. Tears cut clean tracks through the dirt on his face. I need help. I haven't eaten in 2 days. Tiffany, she ruined me, Dad. She took it all. I have nothing. I am sleeping on a grate. He reached out a hand. His fingers were blue. He wasn't wearing gloves. Can you give me something, he begged. I know you are rich now. I saw it in the papers. You have millions. Just a 20, Dad, or 100. Please. I just need to get a room, just for one night. I reached into my pocket. I felt the leather of my wallet. It was thick with cash. I had $500 in bills right there. It would be nothing to me to hand it to him. It would be easier than breathing. But I didn't pull out the wallet. I knew where that money would go. I saw the tremor in his hands. I saw the desperation. That wasn't just hunger. That was addiction. If I gave him money, he wouldn't buy a room. He would buy a bottle. He would buy a lottery ticket. He would buy 5 minutes of oblivion to forget who he was. And then tomorrow he would be back on this grate, colder and emptier than before. I am not giving you money, Andre, I said. Andre's face crumbled. Why, he wailed. You have so much. You are my father. How can you be so cruel? Cruel, I repeated. I remembered the night he watched his wife throw my clothes into the snow. I remembered the way he drove past me when I was walking in the ditch. That was cruel. This was something else. This was necessary. I took off my gloves. They were heavy-duty lined leatherwork gloves, the kind that keep your hands safe when you're handling jagged metal. I dropped them into his lap. Put these on, I said. Frostbite will take those fingers by morning if you do not. Andre looked at the gloves. He looked confused. Gloves? He sobbed. I cannot eat gloves, Dad. I reached into my inner pocket. I pulled out a small white card. It was a business card for my new venture. Graves Ironworks and Restoration. I handed it to him. Read it, I said. Andre took the card with shaking fingers. Graves Ironworks, he read. We open at 6 a.m., I said. It is a shop, Andre. A real shop. We fabricate steel. We fix machines. It is hard work. It is dirty work. It is hot work. I pointed to the address on the card. Show up tomorrow morning at 6. Ask for the foreman. Tell him Winston sent you. You are offering me a job, Andre asked, wiping his nose. I am offering you a lifeline, I said. You will start at the bottom. You will sweep the floors. You will carry the scrap. You will scrub the toilets. The pay is minimum wage, but you will get a hot lunch, and if you show up every day on time, sober and ready to work, we will see. Andre looked at the card. He looked disappointed. He wanted a rescue. He wanted a check. He wanted me to pick him up and carry him like I did when he was 5. But I cannot sweep floors, Dad, he whined. I have a degree. I am not a laborer. I leaned down. I got close enough to smell the stale alcohol and the unwashed clothes. Look at where you are sitting, son, I whispered. You are on a sidewalk. You are begging strangers for coins. You are already lower than a laborer. A laborer earns his bread. You are waiting for it to fall from the sky. I stood up. You have a choice, Andre. You can sit here and freeze and blame the world, or you can stand up, put on those gloves, and reclaim your name. Andre stared at the card. He was crying silent tears now. Dad, he whispered. I am sorry. I looked at him. I felt the old tug in my heart, the desire to hug him, to tell him it was okay, but it wasn't okay. Not yet. Forgiveness is cheap if it hasn't been earned. Do not call me Dad, I said, my voice hard as iron. Andre flinched. You lost the right to that name when you left me in the ditch, I said. I pointed to the card. To you, I am Mr. Graves, or boss. If you show up tomorrow, if you work, if you sweat, if you rebuild yourself brick by brick the way I rebuilt that boxcar, then maybe one day you can call me Dad again, but not today. Today you are just a man on the street with a decision to make. I stepped back. Matteo, let's go, I said. Matteo looked at Andre. He looked at the man who had been born with everything and lost it. Then he looked at me, the man who had lost everything and rebuilt it. He nodded. Yes, Winston. We turned and started walking. I didn't look back. I wanted to. Every cell in my body wanted to turn around and see if he was putting on the gloves. I wanted to see if he was standing up, but I kept walking. I heard Mateo fall into step beside me. His footsteps were firm and confident. Do you think he will show up? Winston, Mateo asked softly. I don't know, I said, looking at the gray sky. He looked broken, Mateo said. You have to break a bone before you can set it straight, I said. He is at the bottom, Mateo. The bottom is a terrible place, but it is also a solid foundation. If he pushes off, he can rise. If he stays there, well, that is his choice. We walked in silence for a block. The wind picked up swirling snow around our ankles. I touched the welding cap on my head. I had given him the tools, just like my father had given me, just like the world had given me. A pair of gloves and an opportunity. That was all a man needed. That was all a man deserved. The rest was up to him. I looked at Mateo. Are you hungry, son? I asked. Starving Mateo smiled. Let's get some food, I said. Then we get back to work. We have a school to build. We walked into the crowd, disappearing into the flow of the city. Behind us on a cold grate, a man sat holding a pair of leather gloves, staring at a small white card, wondering if he had the strength to stand up. The reunion was over. The test had begun. The snow is gone now. The biting wind that tried to freeze the marrow in my bones has been replaced by a gentle breeze coming off the lake, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs and fresh sawdust. It is spring in Chicago. The rail yard that was once a graveyard of rusted steel and forgotten dreams has been transformed. It does not look like a scar on the city anymore. It looks like a garden. I am sitting on the steel steps of the original orange boxcar. I kept this one just the way it was on the outside. I kept the rust. I kept the dents. I even kept the scorch mark where the Molotov cocktail hit the metal. It serves as a reminder. It is the monument to the winter that almost broke me. But inside it is now my office. It has a mahogany desk and a wall of monitors and a coffee machine that makes a cup almost as good as the ones Mateo used to brew over an open fire. I take a sip from my mug. It is warm. My hands are steady. I look out over the property. Where there used to be weeds and frozen mud, there are now paved walkways lined with solar lights. Where there used to be empty tracks leading to nowhere, there are now rows of homes. But they are not ordinary houses. They are train cars. We bought 50 decommissioned boxcars. We stripped them down to the frame. We cut windows into the sides floor-to-ceiling glass that lets the light pour in. We insulated them with high-grade foam. We clad the interiors in birch wood and bamboo. We installed kitchenettes and bathrooms with heated floors. We painted them in bright colors: blue, red, yellow, green. From the sky, the development looks like a string of jewels laid out on the iron rails. We call it Lucille's Haven. I named it after my wife. She always said that a house is not a home unless the door is open to those who need it. This place is her spirit made of steel and glass. It is not a shelter. I hate that word. A shelter is temporary. A shelter is where you hide. This is a community. I watch an elderly woman, Mrs. Higgins, walking her small dog along the central path. She is 80 years old. Last winter, she was sleeping in her car behind a grocery store. She was terrified. She was invisible. Now she has a key to the blue car number 4. She has a flower box in her window filled with geraniums. She waves to me. I wave back. She is safe. She will never be cold again. Further down the path, I see a group of teenagers. They are sitting on a bench laughing. They are the kids the system gave up on, the ones who aged out of foster care, the ones who ran away from bad situations. They live in the green cars. They work in the vocational school I built in the old warehouse. They are learning to weld. They are learning plumbing. They are learning electrical work. They are learning that they have value. Mateo is standing in the center of the yard, holding a tablet directing a delivery truck. He is the director of operations. He wears a hard hat and a safety vest, but underneath he is wearing a suit. He stands tall. He speaks with authority. He is 20 years old, but he commands the respect of men twice his age. He is the son of my spirit. He looks over at me and gives a thumbs up. I nod. The ship is in good hands. And then there is the new laborer. I look toward the perimeter fence. There is a man digging a post hole. He is wearing dirty coveralls and heavy leather gloves. He is sweating. His muscles are straining as he drives the shovel into the earth. It is Andre. He showed up. It took him 3 days after our meeting on the street, 3 days of shivering on that grate, 3 days of wrestling with his pride. But on the fourth morning at 6 a.m. sharp, he walked into the shop. He didn't say a word, he just took the broom and started sweeping. He has been working for 6 months now. He lives in a small studio apartment he pays for with his own wages. He is sober. He is tired. He looks 10 years younger than he did when he was begging. He looks up from the hole. He wipes his forehead with his sleeve. He sees me sitting on the steps. He doesn't wave. He doesn't smile. He just nods. A short, sharp nod of acknowledgement. I nod back. He is not dad to me yet, and I am not son to him. We are just two men working. But the anger is gone. The ice has melted. He is building his character one shovel of dirt at a time. And that is enough. I look at the brass plaque mounted next to the gate of the community. It shines in the afternoon sun. Lucille's Haven. Established 2024. Built by the hands of the forgotten. I think about Tiffany. She is currently serving the first year of a 15-year sentence in a federal prison. She writes letters sometimes. She blames her lawyers. She blames the judge. She blames me. She has not learned. Some metal is too brittle to be forged. It just cracks under pressure. I do not hate her anymore. I just feel pity. She had everything and she ended up with nothing. I had nothing and I ended up with everything. I finish my coffee. I stand up. My hip still aches a little when it rains, but today it feels strong. I walk down the steps. I walk onto the grass. A young boy runs past me chasing a soccer ball. He is maybe 10 years old, living in one of the family units with his mother. He stops when he sees me. "Hi, Mr. Winston," he chirps. "Hello, son," I say. "Are you the boss?" he asks, looking at my welding cap. I smile. I touch the brim of the old greasy hat. "No, son," I say. "I am just the maintenance man. I just fix things." The boy runs off laughing. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet spring air. I was 73 when my life ended. And I was 74 when it truly began. I thought the boxcar was a coffin. I thought the snow was my burial shroud. But it wasn't. It was a cocoon. I had to be stripped down. I had to lose the house, the comfort, the false security. I had to be reduced to just my hands and my will. Because only then could I find the treasure. Not the bonds. The bonds are just paper. The treasure was the strength I didn't know I still had. I look at the sun dipping below the skyline. The city lights are starting to flicker on. I am not a victim. I am not a tragedy. I am a builder. I walk over to the vocational school. I can hear the hum of a welding torch from the open bay door. It is the most beautiful sound in the world. It is the sound of creation. I walk inside. A young girl is struggling with her bead. She is holding the torch too tight, her hand shaking. I step up behind her. "Relax your grip," I say softly. "Let the fire do the work. You just guide it." She relaxes. The flame steadies. The molten steel flows smooth and bright. She lifts her mask and smiles at me. "Thanks, Winston." "Anytime," I say. I walk back out into the twilight. I sit back down on my steps. I am tired, but it is a good tired. It is the tiredness of a day well spent. I look up at the sky. The first star is visible. "Lucille," I whisper. "We did it. We built a longer table." I close my eyes and listen to the sounds of the haven, the laughter, the cooking, the living. I am Winston Graves, and I am finally home. They thought the cold would kill me. They thought stripping me of my house, my money, and my dignity would turn me into dust. But they forgot one thing: steel is forged in fire, but it is tempered in ice. My son saw an old man. The world saw a homeless bum. But inside, I was still the man who built the tracks this country runs on. You can steal a man's roof, but you cannot steal his hands, and you certainly cannot steal his soul. Dignity isn't about the house you live in. It is about what you build when everything else falls apart. In the end, the storm didn't break me. It just cleared the path for me to see who really mattered. Thank you for listening to my story. It has been a long road from the freezing cold of that winter to the warmth of this spring. I hope my journey has shown you that no matter how dark the night gets, the sun always rises if you have the courage to wait for it. Now I have a question for you. If you were in my position, would you have given Andre a job, or would you have left him on the street to learn his lesson alone? Did I show too much mercy or just enough? I read every single comment, so please let me know your thoughts down below. And if this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who is going through a hard time. Remind them that they are stronger than they think. Until next time, keep building, keep fighting, and never let the fire go out.